Chapter 1. Both babies are perfectly healthy at the hospital in the OB/GYN department. Grace Rowan clutched her appointment slip, sighing with relief at the doctor's words. 7 months pregnant, she'd endured quite a bit, but hearing that both babies were healthy suddenly made it all seem worthwhile. A little past 7 in the evening, the sound of a key turning in the lock came from the door. She quickly got to her feet. "Honey," Ethan Shaw appeared at the doorway. Hearing her voice, he didn't look up. Perhaps because he'd had a long day at work, he looked exhausted. He didn't speak, just kept his head down as he changed his shoes. "I had my checkup today. The babies are healthy." Ethan had meetings today and couldn't go, so she went by herself. The hospital wasn't far, so it wasn't a big deal. Grace said happily, "I was just thinking about names for the babies. What do you think we should call them?" This was the 3rd year of their marriage, and the family had been eagerly awaiting children for a long time. Especially Ethan's mother, who called constantly, asking if they were pregnant yet. Since getting pregnant, everyone in the family had been thrilled. And although the pregnancy was tough, the thought of 2 adorable babies soon joining the family seemed to make everything worthwhile. Ethan finished changing his shoes, his face devoid of any smile. "Get rid of the babies." What? Grace was still lost in happy anticipation. Hearing Ethan's words, she froze. Had she heard him right? He actually wanted her to terminate the pregnancy. Grace had married Ethan Shaw when she was 21. They had dated for 2 years. Ethan had always treated her well and had never touched her intimately. She was conservative and wasn't comfortable with premarital sex. She figured they'd cross that bridge after getting married. Only after the wedding did she discover Ethan was impotent. He couldn't father children. Fortunately, she didn't have a high sex drive and had always felt that as long as their emotional connection was strong, his physical limitation didn't matter much. After all, she loved him. But his family didn't know about this and kept pressuring them to have children quickly. Later, seeing friends who married around the same time having kids while they didn't, coupled with his mother's constant urging, he suggested artificial insemination and convinced Grace to go through with it. These past few months, Grace had endured a lot for the 2 babies growing inside her. She never expected that now. He would actually demand she terminate the pregnancy. Grace asked, "Why?" Ethan said, "I spoke to a friend at the hospital today. He said there's still a chance my condition can be treated. I want to try again. These babies, when they're born, won't be mine biologically. They have no blood relation to me. I don't want them anymore." Grace stared at him in disbelief. He made getting rid of the babies sound so easy. She spoke up, "You were the one who wanted this initially. You said, so what if they aren't biologically yours? I'm carrying them, they'll be our children. Besides, they're already 7 months along, they'll be born soon." 7 months. She had suffered and sacrificed, had accepted the existence of these 2 babies, and had begun to look forward to a future with them. And now he just decides he doesn't want them? Ethan said irritably, "Once they're born, we'll have to raise them. Do you think raising 2 kids is easy? If I spend all my money on them, how will we afford to have our own children later? These 2 are enough for us besides. Children aren't trash you can just throw away. You were the one who decided to have them in the first place. So, are you going to get rid of them or not?" Ethan looked at her impatiently. "No," Grace said, "I'm not as heartless as you. Don't you know how difficult this pregnancy has been for me?" She had already bonded with them. She wouldn't terminate the pregnancy no matter what. Especially today at the hospital, seeing how well the babies were developing warmed her heart so much. Asking her to get rid of them now was too cruel. Ethan said, "Fine. If you want to give birth, do it yourself. I won't contribute anything. And if you insist on having them, once they're born, you raise them yourself. We'll get a divorce." "What did you say?" She never thought the word divorce would come out of his mouth. She had always believed Ethan treated her well, which was why she had accepted everything about him before, no matter what. But she never expected him now to actually. Ethan said, "I'm not kidding. They're not my children. Why should I raise them?" With that, he opened a door and shut himself inside the room. Grace stood alone in the living room, the air conditioning seeming to blow colder and colder. Later that evening, her mother-in-law, Elena Shaw, called. "Grace." "Mom," Grace replied, realizing only when she heard her mother-in-law's voice that tears had been streaming down her face. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried. She quickly wiped away the tears, afraid her mother-in-law would notice something was wrong. Over the phone, Eleanor asked, "Ethan just told me you need to terminate the pregnancy. Why?" "You should ask him." "I don't know. He asked me to persuade you to get rid of the babies or else get a divorce. He seemed to like the idea of children before. Did you do something to make him angry?" "I didn't do anything," Grace said. "He's the one who decided he doesn't want the children anymore." "How is that possible?" Eleanor paused, then asked sharply, "Is it because these babies aren't actually his?" She couldn't think of any other reason why her son would suddenly reject the children. Hearing her mother-in-law's words, Grace was momentarily speechless, unsure where to even begin. Technically, the babies weren't Ethan's biologically, but the decision to proceed with artificial insemination had been agreed upon back then. She never imagined that now, with the babies 7 months along, he would suddenly turn on her like this. Before Grace could respond, Eleanor took her silence as confirmation and started shouting into the phone. "So it's true, Grace, I never thought you were that kind of person. Our whole family treated you so well, and you could actually do something like this." Eleanor finished her tirade and hung up abruptly. When Grace woke up, she found herself in a hospital. Outside the door, there was a commotion. It was the voice of her mother-in-law, Eleanor Shaw, sounding exactly like she had on the phone before Grace fainted. "Your daughter could actually pull something like this, get a divorce immediately. What fine upbringing the Rowans provide. My perfectly good son treated her so well. And she wasn't satisfied, even daring to find another man outside. Shameless hussy." Grace opened her eyes and saw her father, Arthur Rowan, sitting beside her. Seeing him, tears immediately welled up. "Dad." The grievance in her heart was overwhelming. She didn't know where to begin. Arthur looked at her, his face devoid of any smile. He asked, "Whose child is it?" Chapter 2. "This man looks just like the babies." Her father's words struck Grace like a physical blow. Now even her father thought she had cheated. She said, "They're Ethan's." "Ha!" Lily Rowan, standing nearby, scoffed. "Sister, do you think everyone is stupid? The Shaws wanted children so badly. If they were really Ethan's, would they force you to get rid of them? Just admit what you did. Dad always holds you up as an example for me. I really didn't expect you were this kind of person." Lily had never liked Grace, and now that this had happened, she certainly wasn't going to be polite. Arthur said, "Get rid of the babies. Go back and apologize to your mother-in-law. Maybe she'll still forgive you." "I did nothing wrong. You really are." Arthur looked at her, his eyes bloodshot with anger. "How could I have a daughter like you?" Not knowing what else to say, he simply left the hospital room, walking away. After they left, Ethan Shaw walked in. He stood by the door, looking at Grace, and said, "Get rid of the babies." Grace looked up at him. Just a few days ago, she had been thinking how lucky she was to have met such a good husband. Now, however, she only felt a chill down her spine. She looked at him numbly. "You deliberately ruined my reputation just to make me get rid of the babies," Ethan said. "I just wanted you to know I won't accept these children. And in the future, no one will acknowledge them as mine." "You're so cruel." Grace looked at him. "The babies are innocent. How could you do something like this?" "What's innocent about them? They haven't even been born yet. Women are just too soft-hearted. Let's get a divorce," Grace said. Ethan laughed. "So you're really going to have the babies, aren't you? Fine, you want a divorce, okay, but you're not getting the house." "Why not? We bought the house together. It should be half mine." "Why should the house I bought be lived in by two bastards?" Ethan Shaw, hearing him utter the word bastards, Grace felt sick to her stomach. She couldn't believe she had ended up with this kind of person. The man she had lived with for 3 years turned out to be this kind of man. 4 years later, early morning. Grace Rowan sat at the dining table, phone in hand, looking at a message in a group chat about Ethan Shaw's remarriage. Ethan Shaw got married yesterday, actually married Linda Lockwood. Wow, lucky him. Didn't he get divorced? A divorcee marrying someone rich and pretty. Don't you guys know? They divorced because his wife cheated and got pregnant with someone else's child. Grace read the messages in the chat, remembering the events of that year, and felt a chill run down her spine again. Even after all this time, the memory of Ethan's face back then still made her sick. See, life really isn't fair. A person like him thrived at his company these past few years and even married the CEO's daughter. And her. Of course my mommy is pretty. If she wasn't pretty, how could she have had such good-looking kids like us? Davy's voice came from the sofa. interrupting Grace's thoughts. Grace glanced over and saw Davy was live streaming again with his tablet. "I want to show you guys, but my mommy won't let me. She'll get mad. Where do we live? I can't tell you that mommy says bad people might come and kidnap us." "Thanks for the gift, sis, love ya." As he spoke, he made a heart shape with his hands. Grace watched his precocious act, an unconscious smile playing on her lips. Although she had suffered a lot because of the children over the years, seeing Danny and Davy growing up now made it all feel worthwhile. Wendy Goodwin opened the door from the outside and came in. Seeing Grace still at home, she said, "You haven't left yet." Grace stood up. "I said I'd wait for you to get here before leaving." "You should hurry up, don't be late," Wendy said. "Leave the kids with me, just go. What if you're late and they get upset? I worked hard to line up this job for you." She bustled like a mother hen, pushing Grace towards the door. Grace stood at the door changing her shoes. Danny saw she was leaving and quickly ran over. "Mommy." Compared to Davy, Danny was less talkative. During the live streams, he usually just sat nearby, rarely speaking. Despite this, quite a few people online loved his cool demeanor. Seeing Grace about to leave now, he wanted to go with her. Grace looked at Danny, ruffled his hair and comforted him. "Stay home with Auntie Wendy, okay? Mommy just needs to go out for a bit." "What, Auntie Wendy? Grace, you're making me sound old. Didn't you say calling you Auntie made you feel old?" Grace glanced at her and chuckled. It was Saturday, so Wendy didn't have work and came over to help with the kids. She truly felt blessed, as if from a past life, to have such a friend. Otherwise, back then, when everyone abandoned her, giving birth alone in the hospital, she really didn't know how she would have survived. The two often bickered playfully, but in reality, Grace considered her her very best friend. Coming out of the elevator, Grace stood downstairs. Thinking about the past few years, she let out a breath, stood by the roadside, and hailed a cab, heading directly to the Thornton residence. She entered through gate 2, where Martha Goodwin came to meet her. Martha looked at Grace and said, "You must be Wendy's friend?" Grace nodded. "Yes, hello, Mrs. Goodwin." Martha was Wendy's aunt and had worked for the Thorntons for a long time. She was the one who had recommended Grace for this job. Martha glanced at Grace and explained the situation at the Thornton house. "Our third master had a car accident 2 years ago, and his legs haven't been right since. That's why they wanted to try an acupuncturist. Wendy mentioned you, so I suggested they call you." "Thank you, Mrs. Goodwin. Don't mention it. Let's go up." Martha led Grace upstairs. The Thornton residence was huge, much larger than she had imagined. Following Martha, she first met Mr. Thornton's assistant, Oliver Owen, who checked her credentials before allowing her to enter. "Third master," Assistant Owen announced, "the acupuncturist you scheduled has arrived." Grace stood beside Assistant Owen and looked inside. She saw the third master Thornton sitting in a wheelchair by the window, a blanket draped over his legs. Hearing him called third master, she had expected an older man, but he was young. Still, seeing his face gave Grace a start. She subconsciously thought of her 2 babies at home. This man looked far too much like Danny and Davy. It was as if they were cast from the same mold. Chapter 3. Encountering the scumbag and his wife at the Thorntons, seeing her frozen at the door, third Master Thornton asked, "Your last name?" His voice was magnetic, yet held an air of authority that commanded respect without anger. Grace lowered her head, feeling it was impolite to stare. "My last name is Rowan. Here is my card." "Dr. Rowan, you may begin." Julian Thornton took her card without looking at it, speaking indifferently. Grace glanced at him and took out her equipment. Actually, Grace hadn't always been an acupuncturist. When she was pregnant with Danny and Davy, she had quit her job to stay home with the children. After giving birth, she learned from the grandfather of Wendy's friend. At first, she just assisted. Later, Mr. Cheng discovered she had a real talent and taught her everything about acupuncture. Mr. Cheng was considered an authority among acupuncturists, and many people trusted him. However, in recent years, his age had caught up with him, and he lacked the energy, rarely taking on new clients. This wasn't Grace's first time performing acupuncture, but today she felt unusually nervous, especially with Julian's assistant, Oliver Owen, watching her intently, as if afraid she might harm Julian. Fortunately, the acupuncture session finally ended. Grace let out a sigh of relief. As she packed her things, she said, "The optimal time for one acupuncture session is half an hour. I'll come back again this evening." When I inserted the needles just now, I noticed Mr. Thornton's muscles are very tight, likely due to unresolved damage from the car accident. After a week of consistent treatment, there should be some improvement. Improvement? It was Assistant Owen who spoke, standing nearby. He looked at Grace with disbelief, seemingly suspecting she was making empty promises. Are you saying there's a possibility Mr. Thornton's legs might recover? Grace asked in surprise. Didn't you call me here to help with Mr. Thornton's leg rehabilitation? Hearing her words, a glimmer of joy appeared on Assistant Owen's face. He glanced at his third master, hardly daring to believe it, then continued speaking to Grace. If Mr. Thornton's legs can truly recover, we will be deeply grateful to you. Honestly, they had called her over with a try-anything attitude, like treating a dead horse as if it were alive. They never expected this long shot might actually hit the mark. They just hoped this Dr. Rowan wasn't just saying things to make money. Grace came out of the room. Martha Goodwin met her at the door and led her downstairs. Have you had breakfast? You can eat something before you leave. No, thank you, Grace said. Wendy is waiting for me at home. I need to hurry back. I'll come again later. Isn't it troublesome running back and forth like this? It's all right. It's Saturday, so traffic isn't too bad. With 2 children at home, Grace felt anxious if she was away for too long. Martha said, all right then. Since this was her first time at the Thornton residence, she wasn't familiar with the layout. The driver had dropped her off at the back gate. Now, Martha led her out through the front entrance. As they walked into the courtyard, they saw a couple entering from outside. It was none other than her ex-husband, Ethan Shaw, and his new wife, Linda Lockwood. Linda clung to Ethan's arm while Ethan carried her handbag. Having just married, they looked very much in love. Although she had long lost all faith in this man, seeing this scene still felt incredibly ironic to Grace. Her only regret now was not getting her share of the house when they divorced. At that time, she had just given birth to the twins, her body was weak, and she had no energy to fight him. He had always kept the documents related to the artificial insemination, and after they fell out, he hid them all. Even if she told her family, they wouldn't believe her, thinking it was just her excuse after cheating. After the divorce, he constantly spread rumors about her, saying they divorced because she cheated. And unbelievably, her friends believed him. Many of them blocked her contact. Ethan got married yesterday. Today, he was accompanying his wife back to visit her grandparents. He hadn't expected to run into Grace here. Seeing Grace, his face immediately darkened. That woman. What was she doing here? Could it be that she found out he married Linda and wanted revenge? Linda's family was well off. If Grace dared to ruin his marriage, he would definitely not let her off the hook. Martha saw the newcomers and greeted them warmly. Miss Lockwood, son-in-law, Linda said. Hello, Mrs. Goodwin. She looked every bit the pampered young lady. Her gaze fell on Grace, noticing Grace's eyes fixed on Ethan. Ethan was handsome, and many women at the company liked him for his looks and capabilities. However, seeing Grace stare at Ethan didn't bother Linda. Many women coveted her husband, but her husband only loved her. As for this woman in front of her, Ethan definitely wouldn't be interested. Linda was very confident in herself. She looked at Grace and asked Martha, "Is this a new housekeeper?" Martha introduced her. "This is Dr. Rowan. She came for an interview today to perform acupuncture for the third master." Oh, I see, Linda didn't quite understand, but since her third uncle wasn't well, many people came to the house, and she didn't know all of them. Acupuncturist? Ethan looked at Grace in surprise. When did she become an acupuncturist? Linda heard his surprised tone, looked at him, and asked, "What's wrong, honey?" Ethan's eyes darkened. He said to Martha, "Are you sure she's reliable? Don't just bring anyone into the house. If she messes up third uncle's health, she can't afford to compensate. He got married yesterday, and she shows up here for an interview today." Grace had been trying to contact him for years about getting the house back, causing no end of trouble. Others might not know, but Ethan didn't believe for a second she was really here for acupuncture. She was most likely here because of him, trying to cause trouble again. Consequently, his tone was quite sharp. Linda had always thought he was a gentle and refined person, usually polite even to the household staff. Seeing him target Grace like this surprised her too. "Honey, it's not easy for people to make a living. Why are you talking about her like that?" "Linda, you're just too kind. There are so many scammers nowadays. Does she even look like an acupuncturist?" He knew Grace. He never knew she could perform acupuncture. Who was she trying to fool? Grace looked at Ethan. From the moment this man appeared, he had been targeting her, acting as if she owed him millions. If she didn't clearly remember everything that had happened over the years, she might almost believe she really did owe him something. She let out a laugh, tinged with sarcasm. Ethan looked at her. "What are you laughing at? Think I'm wrong?" "No, Mr. Shaw isn't wrong. Miss Lockwood, Chapter 4. He ruined her." Linda Lockwood looked quite innocent, seemingly inexperienced. Grace even saw a shadow of herself in her, like the person she used to be, the one completely fooled by Ethan Shaw. Hearing Grace's words, Ethan's face darkened. Was she threatening him? Fine. Linda didn't understand Grace's words and said to Ethan, "Let's go inside. Grandma is waiting. Wasting time here on some irrelevant person was really quite boring." Ethan listened to Linda and followed her inside. Martha Goodwin heard the exchange, glanced at Grace, and said, "You should head back then." "Okay." Around 6 p.m., after having dinner at home with Wendy, Danny, and Davy, Grace returned to the Thornton residence. She thought Ethan and Linda would have left, but as soon as she entered the courtyard, she saw Ethan. Seeing her arrive again, he looked incredulous. He walked straight over, grabbed her arm forcefully, and dragged her behind the rockery. "You bitch, are you crazy?" Grace looked at the man lunging at her, the grip hurting her arm. For a moment, she thought he was some kind of robber. She struggled, saying, "Are you freaking insane?" As a woman, she was physically at a disadvantage, and she had always been sensitive to pain. His rough actions made the places he grabbed feel like they were splitting open. Ethan was stunned for a moment, hearing her curse for the first time. He looked at her contemptuously. "Grace, you've really fallen low, haven't you? Even resorting to foul language." His mockery made Grace want to laugh. She looked at this man. "So what if I curse? You should be proud of yourself for personally turning me into who I am now. Congratulations, Mr. Shaw, you're now the son-in-law of the Lockwood Group chairman. If you hadn't kicked me out back then, you probably wouldn't be where you are today, right?" She had borne children, carried this blame for so long. What was wrong with saying a few curse words? Hearing her bring up the past, Ethan said, "I told you to get rid of the babies back then. You were the one who refused. This has nothing to do with me. Don't blame everything on me. Is that the reason you and your family spread rumors about me cheating, ruining my reputation?" Ethan said, "I never said you cheated." "Right, you didn't say it, you just didn't deny it." Grace looked at him, wishing she could tear him limb from limb. He didn't accuse her of cheating, but he tacitly allowed everything to happen, allowed his family to portray her as an unfaithful woman, destroying her reputation, making everyone look down on her. Ethan said, "Get out of here immediately. I'm warning you. If you dare try to make Linda and me divorce, I won't let you off." "What, are you scared?" Grace sneered. "If you're scared, then give me back the house you owe me that you don't need it now. But my 2 children and I need a place to live." Grace and her 2 children were currently renting, and the monthly rent wasn't cheap. If she could get the house back, it would ease their financial burden significantly. She truly hated the man now, the man who had even fought her for the house back then. Ethan said, "No way." Although he didn't need that house anymore, giving it to her would be admitting to what he did back then. He wouldn't be able to explain it to Linda either. Grace said, "Then just wait for your precious Miss Lockwood to divorce you if my life is miserable. Don't think you'll have it easy either." She pushed him away and started walking towards the house. After all, it was almost time for Mr. Thornton's acupuncture session. Ethan saw her heading inside, assuming she was going to complain to the Thorntons. He had married Linda Lockwood, but Linda's grandparents didn't really approve of him. He was a divorcee with no family background. If Grace went in and said a few things, who knew what would happen? He rushed forward and blocked her path. "You're not going in." "Let go." Ethan grabbed her arm, dragging her outwards. "I knew you came here for me. You think someone like you can get into the Thornton house as an acupuncturist. Dream on, don't you just want the house? Fine, I'll give it to you. Do you have to keep harassing me like this?" He admitted she had some tricks up her sleeve, even managing to get connected to the Thorntons. Although her half-baked acupuncture skills would surely get her fired eventually, Ethan didn't dare let her appear before the Thornton family. Grace couldn't quite believe it. He was actually saying he'd give her the house, but she wasn't here because of him at all. She was being dragged out by Ethan, unable to break free. Just as she was getting anxious, she heard a cool voice nearby, "Dr. Rowan." Grace stopped, and Ethan suddenly released her arm. This was the Thornton residence. He didn't want anyone seeing him struggling with Grace. Grace looked up and saw Oliver Owen standing there. Oliver said, "Mrs. Goodwin is busy with something. She saw you hadn't arrived yet and asked me to come out and check on you. What are you doing?" Because of what Grace had said that morning, Oliver was now full of anticipation regarding her acupuncture skills. So he had come out personally to greet her. Ethan saw Oliver and recognized him as Julian Thornton's assistant. Linda Lockwood's father, Lawrence Lockwood, was the adopted son of the Thornton elders. He called Mr. and Mrs. Thornton Mom and Dad, but there was no blood relation. It was because his parents had been close friends with the Thorntons. After his parents passed away in an accident, he was raised by the Thorntons. So, within the Thornton family, although he had their backing, he didn't actually have any inheritance rights. After all, the Thorntons had their own biological sons. The second son was serving in the military and rarely came home. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton hadn't managed the family affairs for years. Julian handled everything. All business matters of the Thornton family were now decided by him. It was just that he had a car accident a couple of years ago, and rumor had it both his legs were crippled. Ethan had come over today, hoping Linda could introduce him, securing another backer for the future. But he had only managed a distant glance at Julian, without even exchanging words. Now, seeing Oliver, a polite smile instantly appeared on his face, completely different from the menacing look he had shown Grace moments ago. "Good afternoon, Assistant Owen." Oliver glanced at Ethan but paid him little attention. His focus was solely on the third master's affairs. He simply said to Grace, "Please come in quickly." Then he walked away. Seeing himself ignored while Oliver personally came to fetch Grace, Ethan felt a pang of worry. He glanced at Grace and asked, "What does he want with you?" Grace replied coldly, "None of your business." Seeing her icy expression, Ethan grew more anxious, but there was nothing he could do right now except warn her, "If you dare say anything reckless, don't blame me for not letting you off." Grace reached out and smoothed her clothes. "I look forward to it." Chapter 5. Don't fall in love with me. Linda Lockwood was chatting with Catherine Thornton. Seeing Ethan walk in, she said gently, "You're back. Where did you go?" Ethan sat down beside her, saying softly, "Just took a walk outside." Linda smiled and continued chatting with Mrs. Thornton. "How has third uncle been lately? Is he looking for an acupuncturist?" Mrs. Thornton said, "There's no hope for his legs, but the doctor suggested finding an acupuncturist, just trying anything, you know." Mentioning Julian's legs made Mrs. Thornton sigh. Linda took her hand. "Grandma, don't worry. Third uncle will definitely get better. Should I go up and say hello to third uncle?" Linda was the eldest grandchild in the family. Since birth, she had been doted on by everyone, especially Julian, who used to spoil her immensely. But in the past 2 years, because of his legs, he had become much more withdrawn. That's why Julian hadn't even attended her wedding. She had come over today specifically to bring Ethan to meet her third uncle. "Yes, go ahead." Linda stood up, and Ethan accompanied her upstairs, heading straight to Julian's room. Grace was preparing to perform acupuncture on Julian. Thinking about Ethan, she tried hard to compose herself. She couldn't let that scumbag affect her work. She struggled to calm herself when she suddenly heard a knock on the door. Assistant Owen went to open it. "Miss Lockwood." Linda and Ethan appeared at the doorway. Linda walked in and immediately saw Grace standing there. "Oh, she's here too." Oliver glanced at Grace and asked Linda, "What, do you know each other?" Linda said, "I met her downstairs when I came this morning. I heard she was here for an interview. Has she been hired already?" Oliver replied, "Yes. Dr. Rowan will be coming to perform acupuncture for the third master from now on." Linda asked, "Can she cure third uncle's condition?" "That would be wonderful." Grace looked at her and smiled faintly. Linda seemed very naive. Looking at her was strangely like looking at her own daughter. The thought that such a lovely girl was being harmed by a scumbag like Ethan made her feel a sense of pity. Ethan said, "What are you thinking? Her, cure third uncle's condition?" His disdainful tone was unmistakable. He wouldn't dare say it about others, but he was certain about Grace. Grace was most likely just here to coast along. Her goal was to get revenge on him. She couldn't possibly actually help Julian cure his legs. Linda pouted. "You're finding fault with me again?" Ethan addressed Julian. "Good evening, third uncle." Julian looked at the two of them. What are you doing here? He preferred quiet lately and particularly disliked noise, sometimes even skipping meals downstairs because of it. Linda said, Of course, we came to see you. You didn't even come to my wedding. Isn't it okay for me to come see you now? Julian glanced at her. Fine, once you've seen enough, you can leave. Linda took Ethan's hand and introduced him to Julian. Third uncle, this is Ethan Shaw, my husband. He's doing really well at the company now, and he's very good to me. She knew Ethan wanted to get acquainted with Julian, so she specifically introduced him again. Julian glanced at Ethan, showing no interest in the man. He said, I know. You've said it many times already. Ever since they started dating, Linda had constantly praised Ethan. She was naive and saw people and things simply, but Julian was different. He didn't believe Ethan was as good as he appeared, but since Linda liked him, he didn't bother saying anything. Linda pouted. Ethan proactively said, Third uncle is looking for an acupuncturist. I happen to know a very famous one I can introduce to you. For something like acupuncture, it's best to find someone experienced. If you encounter someone with poor skills, they might not help and could just cause more trouble. As he finished, he glanced meaningfully at Grace. Grace's face darkened. She hadn't even mentioned his issues, and he was already eager to drive her out of the Thornton house. This man, was he really that afraid of her? Because of the cheating rumors these past few years, her reputation was tarnished, and she had lost too many jobs. Was he still trying to make her lose this one, trying to push her to the brink? Julian looked at Grace, then at Ethan. No need, she'll do. Ethan said, She doesn't look reliable. If I'm not mistaken, she probably doesn't even have a license. Grace let out a laugh. He really was, putting in maximum effort just to slander her. She took out her qualification certificate and showed it to Ethan. Mr. Shaw, would you like to take a look? Linda reached out and took it, glancing at it. Ethan hadn't expected her to actually produce a certificate. He hadn't realized she had planned this far ahead, even preparing credentials. He took the certificate from Linda, looked it over twice, and said, I wonder where you got this fake certificate made. It looks quite realistic. Grace gritted her teeth. Whether it's fake or not can be easily verified online, right? Why does Mr. Shaw seem so afraid of me entering the Thornton house and treating Mr. Thornton? Could it be that you have a guilty conscience, did something shady, and are afraid of being found out? Oh, playing the passive-aggressive game? Who couldn't? The worst that could happen to her was changing jobs. But if people found out about her past relationship with him, who knew how the Thornton family would treat him? Ethan looked at her. Reckless words come at a price. You'd better be careful. Linda, watching the two clash, said, Honey, what are you doing? She couldn't understand why Ethan was targeting Grace so relentlessly. She had sensed something was off when she saw them this morning. Ethan said, I'm just worried about third uncle's health. Julian sat aside. I know my own body. You two can leave now. Ethan said, Then please rest well. He spoke politely, then lifted his chin, glanced at Grace, and finally left with Linda. After he left and Oliver closed the room door, Grace came back to her senses, realizing her fingers had dug into her palms. Can we begin now, Dr. Rowan? Julian noticed her standing aside, lost in thought, and prompted her. Grace snapped back, looked at him, and said, One moment. She took out the needles, sterilized them, her eyes occasionally drifting towards Julian. Perhaps it was because he looked so similar to Danny and Davy, or perhaps because he hadn't been swayed by Ethan's words just now, she actually found him somewhat agreeable. Ethan now Chapter 6. Both legs can't stand. Grace quickly snapped back to reality and denied. No, not at all. Julian looked at her hesitant manner. If their appearance just now affected your state of mind, I suggest you step outside to calm down. Avoid impacting the upcoming treatment. He didn't want his legs, which weren't yet ruined, to be ruined by her needling. Hearing his words, Grace said, Rest assured, it won't happen. But thank you just now, Mr. Thornton. Thank me? Grace said. Thank you for not kicking me out just because of what others said. Julian didn't miss the gratitude in the woman's eyes. He coolly averted his gaze and said aloofly, I just hate trouble. Finding someone else would be too troublesome. As for you, if you turn out to be completely useless, I'll replace you too. Don't worry and don't fall in love with me. Because of this, I have very high standards. You're not my type. Hearing his presumptuous words, Grace's mouth twitched. Fall in love with him? How did he arrive at that conclusion? Besides, that last sentence, did it have to be so harsh? To prevent him from overthinking, Grace clarified, "Please rest assured, Mr. Thornton. I'm here to treat you solely for your money, nothing else." Julian said, "That's good." Given his status and position, far too many women wanted to marry him. Grace looked at the man's cold and aloof demeanor, momentarily unsure what to say. Oliver had already seen them out and returned. Seeing they hadn't started yet, he asked, "Are we ready to begin?" Grace had completed her preparations. "Yes, we can start." Julian's legs hadn't had feeling for a long time. However, as Grace inserted the needles, he noticed a faint aching sensation. Grace asked, "Do you feel a little bit of pain?" Julian was still in shock. Hearing her words, he grunted in affirmation. Grace said, "That's good. It proves my prediction was correct. The nerves in your legs aren't completely dead. I will come every day for the next week. I hope Mr. Thornton will bear with me." Julian looked at Grace. Her presence seemed to offer him a glimmer of hope. His mood improved considerably. Seeing Grace preparing to leave, he said, "Oliver, see Dr. Rowan out." Oliver nodded. He followed Grace downstairs and personally drove her home. It wasn't easy to hail a cab in this area, so Grace didn't refuse. Once in the car, Grace gave Oliver the address downstairs from her apartment. Oliver drove her home. Arriving downstairs, "Dr. Rowan, we're here," Grace said. "Thank you, Assistant Owen." She opened the car door and got out. Oliver glanced at her, about to leave, when he suddenly noticed someone standing at the entrance of the residential complex. It was Ethan Shaw. Why would Ethan Shaw come looking for Grace here in the middle of the night? Did these two know each other? Remembering how Ethan had targeted Grace in front of the third master today, it seemed to click into place. Apparently, these two had some sort of grudge. Grace also saw Ethan. Her face fell. She said sarcastically, "Isn't this CEO Shaw, who's been avoiding me like the plague? What brings you here?" Ethan's expression turned ugly. The thought that he would have to see this woman constantly at the Thornton residence made him extremely uncomfortable. He looked at Grace and asked, "When did you become an acupuncturist? How come I never knew? Do I need to report to you?" Grace shot him a cold glance, recalling his words at the Thorntons. "Besides, didn't you say so yourself? My certificate is fake, I'm a fraud." Ethan looked at her. The fact that Julian had actually let her stay seemed somewhat ridiculous. He sneered. "Acupuncturist? Someone like you? What kind of acupuncturist can't the Thorntons find? They need you. I bet you just used your looks to get close to Julian, right? That Julian is just a cripple, can't even stand on his own legs. You'd even throw yourself at a man like that. Seems you've really hit rock bottom." He didn't know why, but the thought of her going to another man's side to give him acupuncture, possibly even having to see another man's body, made him extremely uncomfortable. Perhaps all men were like this. Even after divorce, they still wanted their former women to remain loyal to them. Grace let out a laugh. "He's a cripple. Mr. Thornton just can't stand on his two legs. That's better than you, unable to get your third leg up, right? Ethan Shaw, what kind of creature are you to be pointing fingers at others here?" She must have been crazy back then to tolerate even something like that. When she found out about his impotence, she just felt sorry for him, never thinking about anything else. But what happened in the end? He destroyed everything for her, ruined her life thinking about this. She didn't hold back her words with Ethan, knowing this was his biggest insecurity, deliberately poking his sore spot. Hearing Grace mock him, Ethan's face darkened. He was cured now, but the past was still an indelible humiliation for him. Crucially, Grace was the only person in the world who knew about this. In her presence, he always felt somewhat ashamed. He said, "I'm cured now." "Really?" Grace looked at him doubtfully. Her skeptical gaze made Ethan uncomfortable. He retorted, "Why are you looking at me like that? Let me tell you, I couldn't get it up back then because of you. You have absolutely no charm as a woman. I'm perfectly fine with Linda now. It was always your problem. I bet that Julian Thornton only took an interest in you because he's crippled and can't find another woman. I came here just to tell you. You can stay at the Thorntons, fine, but keep your mouth shut if you ruin things for me. Neither of us will have a good time." Grace smiled faintly. "What, are you afraid they'll find out I'm your ex-wife?" Ethan said. "I'm not afraid. I just don't want to be associated with a woman like you, understand?" "A woman like me?" Grace sneered, looking at him. "How did you kneel before my father, begging for my hand back then? How did you kneel before me, begging me to marry you? For you, I carried babies for 7 months, got fat, got ugly. Tell me, what kind of woman am I? Ethan Shaw, don't tell me you think latching onto Linda Lockwood these past 2 years and doing well at the company makes you upper class. You're nothing but a good-for-nothing who climbed up by relying on a woman. As your ex-wife, I should be the one feeling ashamed, understand. What did you say? Ethan's expression instantly turned savage. He raised his hand and grabbed her neck, clearly stung to the core by Grace's words. He truly hated her, wished she would disappear from the face of the earth, because this woman knew all his secrets, all his disgraceful past. Chapter 7. Forcing her into a substitute marriage. Grace didn't struggle as he choked her. She said, "Whether I say it or not, this is who you are. What, you want to strangle me? Then go ahead, even as a ghost, I won't let you off in this lifetime." She looked at him, her eyes reddening involuntarily. No one knew how she had survived these past few years. If it weren't for the 2 babies, if it weren't for Wendy, she thought, she would already be dead. Ethan saw her reddened eyes and faltered slightly. He released her, took out a handkerchief, and wiped his hands as if disgusted by her touch. He put on an air of nobility, as if he were already a superior being, different from her. "As long as you don't mention my past at the Thorntons, we can both live peacefully. If you do, we'll go down together." With that, he got back into his car and drove off. Under the night sky, a breeze blew past. Grace felt chills rack her body. It was summer ever since giving birth. She had become increasingly sensitive to the cold. She rubbed her arms and walked into the residential complex. Taking out her phone, she glanced at it and saw a new message from her stepmother, Vivian Rowan. "Grace, your father is sick and in the hospital. Come and see him." Since her divorce from Ethan and the birth of her 2 children, Grace hadn't returned home. Her father didn't want to see her and completely ignored her. But hearing he was sick still worried her. Grace's mother had passed away early, her father had raised her. Seeing the message now, Grace quickly replied, asking, "How is he?" "He's at First Hospital. Come and see him?" Vivian was actually Lily Rowan's mother. She had married Grace's father later, bringing Lily with her. Grace usually called her Auntie Vivian. Grace replied, "Okay, I'll come tomorrow." She just didn't know if her father would acknowledge her. Her father still believed the children were the result of her affair, not Ethan's. He felt ashamed of her and refused to forgive her. Returning home, Grace opened the door to see both babies standing right there, lined up. One handed her slippers, the other poured her water, being incredibly attentive. Grace looked at these 2 little ones. That's enough. Mommy can manage." "No," Danny said. "Mommy worked hard. Danny can take care of you." Davy took a sip of the water before handing it to Grace. "It's not hot at all." Wendy, lying on the sofa playing King of Glory, looked at Grace enviously. "These 2 sons of yours are really good to you, so capable at such a young age. I can't imagine how pampered you'll be in the future." Looking at her 2 babies, Grace's mood lifted considerably. Although she had experienced many unhappy things in the past, it seemed like fate was now repaying her doubly through her children. However, looking at the little ones' faces, somehow, the image of Julian Thornton she had met today appeared in her mind. The next morning, Grace left home early. Before going to give Julian acupuncture, she first went to the hospital. As she reached the ward door, she heard a mechanical and stern male voice from inside. "The deadline has passed." "Where is Lily Rowan?" Her stepmother Vivian's voice trembled slightly. She said, "Assistant Owen, I don't know where our Lily is right now. My husband is sick now. Could you possibly give us a few more days?" Oliver Owen looked coldly at the woman. This constant stalling clearly indicated she had no intention of handing over her daughter. "How long do you plan to drag this out? All I need is Lily Rowan's address. You've hidden her quite well. If you don't hand her over, the Rowan family can just wait for bankruptcy." Vivian said, "Don't you just want Lily to come back and marry Julian Thornton?" "Actually, our Rowan family has another daughter. She's very beautiful and well-educated too. She'll be here shortly, you can see for yourself then. If it's possible, how about letting her marry him instead of Lily?" Julian's legs were crippled now, and she still wanted Lily to marry him. Not a chance. Grace stood at the door, frowning as she heard her stepmother's words. She had come to see her father. Why did it sound like her stepmother wanted her to marry in Lily's place? Grace had some recollection of Lily's fiancé. This engagement had originally been arranged by their grandfathers, a childhood betrothal. Later, Grace got together with Ethan, so the engagement partner switched to Lily. After Grace divorced Ethan, Lily had even boasted about marrying into a wealthy family, looking very smug. Not long after, something seemed to happen to the fiancé, and Lily ran off. And now her stepmother actually wanted her to marry him. What did she take her for? No wonder her father was sick, and this woman kindly called to inform her. So this was the reason. Hearing Vivian's words, Oliver sneered, "Doesn't Mr. Rowan have another daughter who's already married? What, you want a divorced woman to marry our third master? Even if our third master's legs are crippled, he wouldn't stoop to marrying a divorcee." The only reason they wanted Lily back was purely out of anger at that despicable woman. Oliver said, "Since you can't find her, just wait for bankruptcy." He finished speaking and walked out of the ward, followed by two men in black suits. The formation looked rather intimidating. Vivian followed behind him, trying to stop him. "Assistant Owen, let's discuss this further." As the group walked out, Oliver happened to see Grace at the door and was somewhat surprised. "Dr. Rowan." Vivian saw Grace as if seeing a savior. "Grace, you're here." Grace glanced at her stepmother, saying sarcastically, "Since when have you missed me so much, Auntie Vivian?" Seeing Grace's lack of deference, Vivian's face stiffened slightly. Oliver looked at Grace with surprise. "You are Mr. Rowan's daughter?" Grace didn't deny it. "Yes, the very divorcee you were just talking about." Whether she was divorced or not was none of anyone else's business. She didn't appreciate people gossiping behind her back. Hearing Grace's words, Oliver's expression became slightly awkward. "Apologies, I didn't realize it was you." How could he have known that Grace was Arthur Rowan's daughter? "It's fine, we're not exactly close anyway," Grace said, walking into the ward. Vivian's voice came from behind. "Grace, how could you speak to Assistant Owen like that? So impolite." Grace ignored them and entered the room to see her father. Vivian stood aside. Seeing Grace speak like that, she feared Oliver would get angry and tried to curry favor. "Assistant Owen, please don't mind her. She's not usually like this. Our Grace has always been exceptionally outstanding since childhood, much better than Lily." Grace had just sat down in the ward. Hearing Vivian's words, she found it rather amusing. To get Oliver to agree, Vivian actually started praising Chapter 8. Negotiating with Julian Thornton. If marriage were truly the goal, Julian Thornton wouldn't lack options. This wasn't about marriage at all, it was about that woman, Lily Rowan, daring to run off just because the third master was injured. They would absolutely not let her get away with it. Since they couldn't find her, the Rowan family would have to pay the price. In the hospital bed, Arthur Rowan woke up. Seeing Grace sitting beside him, his face darkened. He asked, "Why are you here?" "Dad." Grace looked at Arthur. Her father seemed to have aged rapidly these past 2 years. His hair had turned white. She couldn't be bothered with her stepmother's petty schemes and asked with concern, "How are you feeling?" Arthur remained cold as ever. "Get out." Oliver had already left. Vivian came in from outside and said to Arthur, "Honey, Grace came all this way to see you. Don't be like this. You two, father and daughter, have been arguing for years. It's time to make up." Speaking of which, the divorce back then wasn't entirely Grace's fault. Ethan Shaw also bears responsibility. If Ethan hadn't treated our Grace poorly, why would she have? Grace was almost certain she'd misheard, seeing her stepmother actively trying to mend her relationship with her father. For years, her father had ignored her, thanks in no small part to this mother-daughter duo. They had frequently added fuel to the fire, driving a wedge between father and daughter. She let out a laugh. "Haven't seen you in a while, Auntie Vivian. Have you had a change of heart? I almost thought you were a different person." Normally, Vivian would have retorted sharply, but now, she needed something from Grace. She was waiting for Grace to marry that cripple from the Thornton family in Lily's place, so she didn't offend her. She merely put on a pitiful expression and said to Grace, "Grace, you saw the man who came just now. He's from the Thornton family. The Thorntons are trying to push us to the brink. They even said they'd make us go bankrupt." Grace said, "My ears aren't deaf. If I heard correctly, their goal is for you to hand over Lily Rowan. If you truly care about the Rowan family, then hand Lily over. If it weren't for my father's sake back then, could your daughter have become Julian Thornton's fiancée? Now that something's happened to him, you break your promise. If I were Julian Thornton, I wouldn't let you off either." When Julian Thornton was doing well, Vivian had constantly praised Lily to her father, trying to secure her daughter's position as his fiancé. Later, as soon as Julian had his accident, Lily rejected him because of his disability and simply ran off. That's why the Thornton family was now involving the Rowan family, pushing them to the verge of bankruptcy. Why should she have to pay the price now? Vivian's face stiffened. She feigned innocence. I want to hand Lily over too, but that child, I don't know where she's hiding now. I can't help it. So, Grace, could you marry him in her place? As long as you marry him, our family won't have to go bankrupt, and your father won't have to lie here in bed worrying about these things. You don't know, he fell ill precisely because of this matter. Saying this, Vivian wiped her tears. She knew Grace cared about her father and was adept at exploiting her filial piety. Grace had no intention of dealing with this woman. She just glanced at the white hair on her father's head, a pang of sadness hitting her. She said to him, "Dad, I will handle this matter. Don't worry." Hearing her words, Arthur said, "The Thorntons want you to marry Julian Thornton. Are you willing?" Grace said, "If I really have to marry him, it's not impossible. I've met him. He seems like a decent person, just a bit narcissistic, but his legs are crippled. If you marry him, you might have to take care of him for the rest of your life." Although he had issues with Grace, the thought of her marrying someone paralyzed from the waist down made him reluctant. She was, after all, his biological daughter. If she hadn't done what she did back then, he wouldn't be ignoring her now. Vivian, seeing a chance, quickly chimed in, "The Thornton circumstances are so good for Grace. A divorcee, marrying into that family is already very fortunate." She had no right to be picky now. Grace looked at her. "How about you marry him, Auntie Vivian?" Hearing this, Vivian nearly pointed her finger at Grace's nose and cursed, "Grace, look what you're saying. Are you hoping I divorce your father? Glad you understand." "Arthur, look at her." Vivian pointed at Grace, feeling like she was about to explode with anger. But in front of her husband, she didn't want to appear too shrewish, so she put on a pitiful act, wiping her tears. "I really owe your Rowan family. I worry myself sick over family matters, and still, she treats me like the bad guy." Grace couldn't be bothered with her. She stood up and said to her father, "Dad, I'm leaving now. I'll come back to see you later." With that, she walked out of the ward. Outside the hospital, she was about to hail a cab when she saw Oliver Owen waiting for her. Since she needed to go treat Julian Thornton anyway, she went with him. In the car, Oliver sat in the passenger seat, messaging on his phone. Grace looked at him and asked, "Assistant Owen." Oliver acknowledged her and looked up. "Dr. Rowan, please speak. If Lily Rowan is found, will you let the Rowan family off?" She hadn't considered marrying Julian Thornton, and besides, he didn't seem interested in her. But finding Lily Rowan seemed quite possible. Hearing the name Lily Rowan, Oliver frowned. "I didn't expect you to be the daughter of the Rowan family, Dr. Rowan." Because of this, his attitude towards Grace wasn't as polite as yesterday. Grace wasn't stupid. She could see the disdain in Oliver's eyes. She said, "I haven't been home much these past few years, so I'm not very clear about the Rowan family's affairs. Regarding Lily Rowan's matter, I am very sorry." What's the use of saying sorry now? Mentioning this angered Oliver. "I've never met such an ungrateful woman, ha." When the third master was doing well, she followed him around like a dog, putting on such a convincing act. The moment something happened, she ran faster than anyone. Seeing Grace listening quietly, Oliver felt it was unfair to vent his anger about Lily onto her. He reined in his temper and cleared his throat. "I know this matter might not be related to you, Dr. Rowan. I was just too angry. As for whether finding Lily Rowan means forgiving the Rowan family, that's the third master's decision. I'm not sure. You can ask him when we get back." Julian Thornton was the one holding the fate of the Rowan family in his hands. Grace nodded, "Thank you." Soon, the two arrived at the Thornton residence. Grace followed Oliver upstairs to see Julian. Julian was sitting at his desk in the middle of a video conference. Seeing them enter, he ended the meeting. Oliver walked over to his side. "Third Master, how are things with the Rowan family?" Julian asked. Oliver glanced at Grace, his expression complicated. Just as he was about to speak, Grace spoke up. Chapter 9. A harsh marriage agreement. Julian's gaze fell on her. "Dr. Rowan, please speak." Because she had given him acupuncture yesterday and his legs had shown a slight sensation, he was still quite polite to her. Grace said, "I'd like to ask you to spare the Rowan family." My father is getting old, and the company is his life's work. I hope you can show some mercy." Julian glanced at Oliver, then back at Grace. "Your father?" He almost didn't understand. Oliver translated, "Dr. Rowan is Mr. Rowan's daughter and also Lily Rowan's older sister." "Is that so?" Julian looked at Grace with some surprise. "You're nothing like her." Julian actually had no favorable impression of Lily Rowan. He had agreed to the engagement initially entirely because it was set by his grandfather. He had been close to his grandfather since childhood. When his grandfather reminisced about his old war buddy and asked him to fulfill the marriage contract, he agreed. Truth be told, Lily Rowan's qualities were truly subpar. But since it was a marriage devoid of affection, he didn't care and tolerated her presence. However, later, when he had his accident, she ran off just like that, turning him into the laughingstock of the city and causing his grandfather to fall ill because of it. His grandfather was still in the hospital now. He truly couldn't tolerate this matter. Grace said, "Assistant Owen is correct. I am Arthur Rowan's daughter. My father is in the hospital now. He really can't take another blow, so I hope Mr. Thornton can spare the Rowan family." Hearing her words, Julian smirked. Although he was polite to Grace, this request crossed his line. "Why should I listen to you? I will do my utmost to help you with acupuncture. I will waive all my fees for this period. Of course, if you really want to find Lily Rowan, I will also find a way to locate her and hand her over to you." Hearing Grace's words, Julian's face hardened. "Your family won't hand Lily Rowan over. If they were going to, they wouldn't have waited until now." It was precisely because they refused to hand her over that he was angry. Thinking about how he had honored his promise back then, allowing Lily Rowan to be his fiancée, but what about them? Did they show him even a shred of respect? Grace explained, "Lily Rowan isn't actually a daughter of the Rowan family. She just came along when her mother remarried into the family. What she did has nothing to do with our Rowan family." "Oh," Julian said, "when the engagement was made, you said she was your family's daughter. Now that something's happened, you disown her. Do I look like a fool?" Grace looked at him. "So, your meaning is you're unwilling to spare the Rowan family no matter what? Even if I help you with acupuncture, treat your legs, it still won't work." "Correct," Julian said. "Unfortunately, I hold grudges. You can't pay for what Lily Rowan did. I don't believe that if you were in my shoes, you could understand someone abandoning their partner when they're in trouble. If even the person you're supposed to marry is so unreliable, then tell me, who in this world can be relied upon?" Hearing his words, Grace was somewhat surprised. She didn't expect Julian Thornton could say such things. She lifted the corners of her mouth slightly. Julian looked at her. "What are you smiling about?" "I'm just smiling at how naive Mr. Thornton is. You weren't even married to Miss Rowan, yet you expected her to be reliable. In this world, even married partners can be unreliable, let alone just a fiancé." Speaking of this, she thought of Ethan Shaw. Dated for 3 years, married for 3 years, only then did she see his true colors. Ending up in her current situation and predicament. And Julian Thornton, this man who held sway over Sea City, was actually more naive than she was. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes. The past was like a thorn embedded in her marrow, impossible to remove. She had once trusted that person so much, yet he had hurt her so badly that she no longer dared to trust anyone. Julian looked at her. For some reason, her gaze caused him a pang of pain. Grace spoke again, continuing, "Since Mr. Thornton won't agree to spare the Rowan family, then I'm sorry, I cannot perform acupuncture for you today." Julian looked at her, not expecting her to actually use this to threaten him. "Doctor, Rowan seems to have forgotten her place. You couldn't possibly think you're the only acupuncturist in the world, could you? What you can do, others can do too." "Then please find someone else, Mr. Thornton. I cannot accept someone who causes my family to go bankrupt and my father to lie sick in bed." After saying this, she nodded and turned to leave. Reaching the door, she grasped the handle, about to open it, when she heard Julian speak. "Wait," Grace turned back and looked at Julian. Julian said, "I can spare the Rowan family." He actually wasn't sure if finding another acupuncturist would really be useful. But at least, she was useful if she could truly enable him to stand again. Sparing the Rowan family seemed like a small price to pay. Grace walked back. "I'm very happy to continue giving you acupuncture. Rest assured, I will do my best to help you recover your health." He agreed, and her mood lightened, even her tone became more relaxed. Julian watched her silently. I haven't finished speaking, I have conditions. Grace looked at him in surprise. Julian said, since Lily Rowan ran off, then you will marry me in her place. Marry him? What kind of joke was this? Grace looked at him in disbelief. But you said yesterday you weren't interested in me. Besides, I'm divorced and have 2 children at home. Mr. Thornton, this offers you no benefit whatsoever. When did I say I was interested in you? Julian said haughtily. Don't flatter yourself. His disdainful look made him seem particularly punchable. Grace said, but I don't want to get married. What, marrying me is beneath you? Oliver, go inform the Rowan family. He made the decision instantly. Oliver. Third master, isn't this inappropriate? It's not like you can't find someone else to marry. Why marry her? This is what the Rowan family owes me. Seeing the 2 of them ignoring her and starting to discuss it, Grace was speechless. I haven't agreed yet. Julian looked at her. You want to help your father, but you're unwilling to pay the price. Things aren't that easy. Once Lily Rowan is found, I'll let you go. Grace understood now. He was using her as a hostage. She looked at him. I will help you find Lily Rowan. Marriage isn't necessary, right? She wasn't the type to break her promise. I don't trust anyone from your family. Was he giving her no chance to refuse at all? Grace looked at the man. If you insist I marry you, then fine. Just make sure you don't regret it yourself. Actually, Grace wasn't worried about Julian tricking her or having designs on her. She had nothing, and given his circumstances, Chapter 10, eating at his house, Oliver went out. Grace remained in the room, starting today's acupuncture treatment for Julian. Following the same routine as yesterday, it quickly concluded. As she began packing her things, Oliver returned, holding a newly printed document. He addressed Grace. This is the marriage agreement. Take a look. Grace glanced at it, then looked at Julian. Getting married requires signing an agreement? Julian stated, naturally. Who knows if you'll grow attached to the position of my wife later on and refuse to leave? Grace took the agreement and read it. The terms were quite harsh. For example, upon divorce, the Thornton family assets would have nothing to do with her. He had the right not to divide any property with her. For example, during the marriage, she was responsible for finding Lily Rowan. Otherwise, he had the right to retract his promise and hold the Rowan family accountable. For example, he had the right to terminate the marriage at any time. After the marriage ended, the female party was not allowed to pester the male party. And for example, the female party was not allowed to interfere in any of the male party's affairs under the guise of being his wife. Basically, it seemed terrified of Grace clinging to him. Grace looked at this marriage agreement, utterly perplexed. She complained to Julian, since you're so afraid of being taken advantage of, why even get married? Julian maintained his aloof expression. I've already explained the reason. If your family members weren't so untrustworthy, I wouldn't have resorted to this. As if he were the one greatly wronged, Grace sighed. Julian asked, what, you find the conditions too harsh? He looked at Grace with an, I knew you had designs on me expression. Grace replied, no, I can sign. The things he mentioned, the concerns he had, would absolutely not happen. She wasn't after his money, nor would she pester him. As for finding Lily Rowan, she would do it. That woman had caused so much trouble for her family and then hid away. Grace really didn't want to see her family pay for Lily's selfish actions. Her father had always been cautious over the years. He probably never expected Lily to run off like this now. Grace took the pen and signed her name on it. There were 3 copies of the agreement in total. Each of the 3 kept one. Grace kept one for herself. She placed the agreement in her bag, preparing to leave, when she heard Julian say, stay for lunch together. After lunch, I'll have someone from the registry office come over to handle the marriage procedures. Grace, worried about her 2 babies, asked, can I go back first and come back later? What, having a meal with me makes you feel ashamed? Julian looked at her critically. Grace replied, I just have things to attend to at home. Julian said, what could be more urgent than your father's situation? He was clearly trying to save her the trouble of running back and forth, kindly inviting her for a meal, and she dared to refuse. Grace countered, didn't you say you'd spare the Rowan family as long as I agreed to marry you? Why did it sound like, from now on, she had to treat him like royalty and couldn't offend him? Julian said, That's the principle, yes, but as I said, I have the right to cancel the agreement at any time. Besides, having a meal with one's husband should be the most normal thing in the world. Hearing him use the word husband, Grace's face darkened slightly. He was getting into character. Rather quickly, Grace didn't want to argue with him either. She nodded in agreement. Who asked her to be the one asking for a favor right now? She left the room and called Wendy. I have something on at noon, I won't be back. Wendy asked, Oh, what is it? Is your dad very sick? How is he? He's okay, Grace said. It's something else. How are Danny and Davy? Let me talk to them. They're fine, Wendy said. But talking on the phone might not work. They're live streaming right now. Don't interrupt their important work. Grace was speechless. So me wanting to hear my baby's voices is interrupting your important work, Wendy said. If you want to see your babies, just watch their stream. They're big internet celebrities now, unlike you. Wendy was excessively sharp-tongued. Sometimes Grace suspected this best friend was born just to roast her. She said, Fine, then you guys figure out lunch. Order some takeout. Wendy didn't cook herself. If Grace wasn't coming back, they could only eat takeout. The two babies didn't like takeout, only eating a little each time. They only liked food Grace made, which was why she wanted to go back and be with them at noon. Wendy said, Got it. We're not 3-year-olds. You handle your business. I'm hanging up now, playing a game. Wendy quickly hung up the phone. Grace looked at the phone, sighing helplessly. She was worried they wouldn't have lunch if she didn't go back, but now it seemed like she was the superfluous one. After finishing the call, Grace went to the living room and saw Mrs. Thornton sitting on the sofa, watching a live stream on her phone, smiling so broadly her mouth couldn't close. Madam, Grace greeted proactively, if she married Julian, this woman would be her mother-in-law. Grace remembered when she married Ethan. In the first 2 years, they couldn't conceive. Although it was Ethan's issue, her mother-in-law always thought it was her fault, finding fault with her constantly. Seeing Mrs. Thornton now, she felt somewhat apprehensive. Historically, there weren't many mothers-in-law who weren't critical of their daughters-in-law. Although her marriage to Julian was temporary, she wondered how Mrs. Thornton would react if she found out. Hearing Grace's voice, Mrs. Thornton looked up at her and smiled. Dr. Rowan, please sit. Grace sat down on the sofa. Mrs. Thornton said, I heard from Oliver that the treatment has been very responsive these past 2 days. If you can cure our Julian, we would be immensely grateful. Grace felt embarrassed. Madam, you're too kind. It's my honor to contribute to Mr. Thornton's recovery. Mrs. Thornton smiled, not turning off the video on her phone. Grace asked, Are you watching a live stream? Indeed. Mrs. Thornton moved her phone closer, sharing it with Grace. Look at these 2 babies. They're so cute. I watch their stream every day now. I wonder when our Julian will have children. Grace glanced at the screen and instantly felt suffocated. On the screen, Danny was sitting on the sofa, holding a Rubik's Cube, solving it. Chapter 11. Julian's grandfather during live streams. Unlike Davy, he didn't talk much, just quietly did things. He could now solve a 12x12 Rubik's Cube very quickly. Grace had never watched Danny and Davy's live streams on her phone before. She usually thought the kids were just playing around. After all, people nowadays like to stream whatever they were doing, but few actually watched. It was mostly for self-entertainment. She never expected someone actually watched. She sneakily glanced at Mrs. Thornton, noticing her eyes filled with laughter. Seeing Danny, her smile widened. She said to Grace, Look, isn't he amazing? So young, yet so skilled at solving Rubik's Cubes, I can't even do it. Grace replied awkwardly, He's all right. Basic operation. Perhaps because she was used to seeing it at home, she didn't think it was particularly remarkable. Danny knew many things. Children naturally excelled at these kinds of things. Other kids were probably similar. Mrs. Thornton said, By the way, I heard from Mrs. Goodwin that Dr. Rowan also has 2 children. Grace nodded. Yes. The ones you're watching right now, Mrs. Thornton said. You're so blessed. Unlike my Julian, he has no interest in getting married, only knows work, work, work. All I want now is for him to get married quickly, start a family, have 2 kids, so I won't be so idle all day. And you know what? The more I look at these 2 kids, the more I like them. They look exactly like our Julian when he was little. Grace? She glanced at the screen, then thought of Julian's cold face. Never mind when he was little, they looked very similar even now nose, mouth practically identical templates. Grace felt an indescribable sense of guilt, desperately wanting to turn off the video. Fortunately, Mrs. Goodwin's appearance saved her. "Madam, lunch is ready," Mrs. Thornton said. "All right, tell Julian to come down for lunch. Dr. Rowan, let's go to the dining room first." Grace nodded. She went to the dining room with Mrs. Thornton first. A short while later, Julian was pushed downstairs by Oliver. No one else from the Thornton family was present, just them. During the meal, Mrs. Thornton warmly attended to Grace. "Dr. Rowan, eat more, don't be polite." Grace glanced at the cold-faced Julian across from her and nodded. "Okay." Mrs. Thornton served her food, saying, "Usually it's just Julian and me eating at home. This guy likes to keep a straight face during meals, it's really boring. Don't let him scare you." Grace smiled. "I won't." It seemed Mrs. Thornton understood her son quite well. Hearing his mother complain about him, Julian said, "Mom, do you have to tell everyone you meet about me?" Mrs. Thornton said, "Just kidding, I didn't say anything bad about you. Look at you, Dr. Rowan is having a meal at our house, and you're still pulling a long face. Wasn't I just worried you'd scare her off?" Julian glanced at Grace but didn't speak. Mrs. Thornton said, "By the way, Grandpa called just now." Hearing Grandpa, Julian's expression softened slightly. "How is he?" "He asked about your marriage. Speaking of which, if it weren't for the car accident, you should have been married with children by now. Right, didn't Oliver go to the Rowans today? Still no news of Lily Rowan?" Julian said, "No." Mrs. Thornton said, "Actually, that woman isn't all that great either. Let her run off if she wants. I've asked someone to arrange a few blind dates for you. Why don't you take a look? If you find someone suitable, let's get married." As for Lily Rowan, although she was previously engaged to Julian, after running off like this, there would be no place for her in the Thornton family anymore. She used to be very good at sweet talking, and Mrs. Thornton had quite liked her, often urging Julian to marry her. Now, she felt somewhat relieved they hadn't brought that woman into the family. Julian said, "No need." Mrs. Thornton said, "Julian." Julian knew what his mother wanted to say and interrupted her. "I've already decided on the marriage. I'll have someone come home this afternoon to handle the marriage procedures." "Huh?" Mrs. Thornton was about to persuade her son further when she heard this, slightly stunned. "Marriage procedures? With whom?" Julian's gaze landed on Grace. "Her." Mrs. Thornton was dumbfounded. She looked at Grace, her eyes filled only with shock. Sensing Mrs. Thornton's gaze, Grace also felt awkward. If roles were reversed, she wouldn't accept her son marrying a woman he just met, who was divorced and had 2 children fortunately. Her marriage with Julian was only temporary. Grace opened her mouth. "Madam?" Julian's explanation was vague. Grace wanted to clarify things to prevent Mrs. Thornton from thinking she and Julian were really getting together. Before she could speak, however, she heard Mrs. Thornton sigh and say, "All right then. I have no demands for you anymore. As long as it's a woman, it's fine. As long as you're willing to get married, that's acceptable too." Grace, "Madam, aren't you being a bit too casual? Shouldn't this be the moment you object vehemently, throw millions at my face, and tell me to leave your son? What's with just agreeing like this?" Grace said, "Madam, actually Julian interjected, "Actually, she is Arthur Rowan's daughter." Hearing this, Mrs. Thornton looked at Grace, surprised again. Grace braced herself and spoke again, "Yes, I am the daughter of the Rowan family. Lily Rowan is my younger sister. However, she came along when her mother remarried into the family. I apologize for what happened before. I will find her as soon as possible and make sure she apologizes properly." Mrs. Thornton looked at Grace's sincere expression and didn't say much. After lunch, Grace followed Julian up the elevator to the study. Inside the study, she spoke to Julian, "We're only temporarily married. Why didn't you explain clearly to your mother? She'll take it seriously." Julian said, "Regarding the agreement, besides Oliver, I don't want anyone else to know. The reason I asked you to marry me was simply to put my family's mind at ease. What else did you think it was for? If you really want to reassure your mother, you should find a woman you like and get married properly. She loves you very much and hopes you can get married and have children." Julian raised an eyebrow at her. "What, the marriage procedures aren't even done yet, and you're already hinting you want to have my children?" "Damn it, this conversation is impossible," Grace said. "Let me repeat myself, I have no interest in you, let alone having your children. Who do you think you are, some emperor?" "Really?" She was perfectly happy with Danny and Davy. Okay, seeing her speak so earnestly, Julian said, Playing hard to get won't work on me. Forget it, I don't want to get married anymore. Grace really couldn't stand him anymore. Was he being overly self? Chapter 12. Grandpa Thornton likes her very much. Fortunately, Oliver soon entered with the staff from the Civil Affairs Bureau. Third Master, we can begin. The staff helped the two complete the marriage procedures and even issued the red marriage certificates. Grace looked at the photo on it, never imagining she too would one day treat marriage so trivially. After the marriage procedures were completed, she looked at Julian and asked, "Can I go back now?" "I'm going to the hospital to see Grandpa. You'll accompany me," Julian stated. Hearing his words, Grace recalled Julian discussing his grandfather with his mother earlier. Julian's grandfather seemed to have fallen ill because of the Lily Rowan incident. The Thornton family's status, looking across the entire Sea City, was second to none. Speaking of which, the two families weren't exactly social equals. Many people wanted to climb the Thornton social ladder. But back then, the old man hadn't cared about these things. Solely to fulfill the promise made to his old war buddy, he had arranged the marriage contract with the Rowan family, wanting his grandson to marry a Rowan daughter. Unexpectedly, the Rowan family showed no gratitude, even committing such a treacherous act when Julian encountered trouble. Leaving the Thornton residence, Grace went with Julian to the hospital. Outside the ward, Ethan Shaw was on the phone. "I'm at the hospital now, I'll be over later. Can't you handle such a small matter?" He was here today accompanying Linda Lockwood to visit Grandpa Thornton. Linda was usually very obedient at home. Saying Grandpa Thornton was pitiful alone in the hospital, she insisted on coming to keep him company. He had no choice but to come along. Women, their hearts were always softer besides. Currying favor with Grandpa Thornton would also improve his standing within the Thornton family later on. Ethan knew that the Thorntons didn't really look highly upon him. They all felt his family background wasn't good enough, not a match for Linda. But if Grandpa Thornton liked him, that would be different, honey. Linda's gentle voice came from inside the ward. Ethan quickly hung up, walked into the ward, and saw Linda's clothes soaked with porridge. Grandpa Thornton sat nearby, looking at her, saying, "Go away." Grandpa Thornton often suffered from dementia and, crucially, enjoyed playing pranks. Every time family members came to visit, he made their lives miserable. Linda looked distressed. "My clothes are all dirty. What should I do?" Ethan took some tissues and helped her wipe her clothes. "It's okay, it'll wash out." "What are we going to do about Grandpa like this? He doesn't even recognize me anymore." Linda looked thoroughly vexed. Ethan said, "Stay away from him in case he hurts you." "Did you get burned?" "No," Linda shook her head. Ethan pulled her over to sit down, took out a handkerchief, and helped wipe her clothes and fingers clean. The caregiver quickly came in to clean the room. As he was taking care of Linda, Grandpa Thornton walked over with a cup and poured water all over Ethan's head. Ethan was usually a very meticulous person. Every time he went out, his clothes were impeccably chosen, and his hair was styled perfectly. Now, Grandpa Thornton's cup of water had completely ruined his image. He looked up, snatched the cup from Grandpa Thornton's hand, truly furious. This old man, why did he keep doing things like this? If he had known, he wouldn't have come anyway. No matter how nice he was to this old man, he wouldn't remember then. Don't blame him for being ruthless, Third Master. Just as he was about to lose his temper, he suddenly heard the caregiver's voice, paused, and put the cup down. Grace followed Julian into the room and saw the mess inside. Ethan was drenched, looking pathetic. Although usually a scumbag, he always presented himself elegantly. Now, soaked in water, he looked truly miserable. Grandpa Thornton stood nearby, grinning, seemingly proud of his prank. If not for his white hair, one might think he was a kindergartner. Ethan saw Julian and said, "Third uncle." Linda also said, "Third uncle, why are you here?" Oliver politely greeted, "Miss Lockwood, son-in-law." Seeing Ethan, he subconsciously glanced at Grace. Last night, when he dropped Grace off, he had seen Ethan looking for her. And now, seeing Grace, Ethan's face darkened as well. Why was Grace here too? Wasn't she just an acupuncturist? She went to the Thornton house to give Julian acupuncture. What was she doing at the hospital? Seeing Julian, Linda couldn't help complaining, "Third uncle, look what Grandpa did to us." Then she said to Ethan, "Honey, quickly go wash up." Ethan took a tissue, wiped the water from his body and head, his face dark. "I'm fine." Even if he wasn't fine, what could he do? He was at the hospital and hadn't brought a change of clothes. He could only wipe himself down for now. Julian glanced at Grandpa Thornton. "Haven't eaten yet," Linda said. "We were about to feed him, but he just wouldn't eat, and he made such a mess of Feng and me." Translator's note. Feng refers to Ethan Chen Feng. Since Linda uses this intimate form, translating it as Ethan might lose nuance, but keeping Feng is awkward. Let's stick with Ethan for consistency, or maybe my husband. Let's rephrase. He made such a mess of Ethan and me. Linda was very frustrated. Julian looked at Grandpa Thornton's condition and frowned. He had grown up with his grandfather and was particularly close to him. His grandfather fell ill right after his own accident and Lily Rowan's departure. His accident was a blow to his grandfather, and Lily's leaving was like adding frost to snow. This was why Julian was determined to find Lily Rowan. That woman, he wouldn't let her off. Grace stood behind Julian, looking at the white-haired old man before her, surprised to realize he was someone she knew. When she was very young, this grandfather had visited her home. He was exceptionally kind, had given her pocket money, and even said, "Little girl, when you grow up, will you marry my little you?" She was very young then, didn't quite understand, and nodded, "Okay." That was so long ago, she never expected this person was Julian's grandfather. Julian spoke, "Prepare lunch again." Right away. The caregiver hurried off to prepare. A short while later, lunch was served. Julian picked up the bowl and said to Grandpa Thornton, who had already sat down, "Time to eat." Grandpa Thornton glanced at Julian. "Not eating," Julian said. "How old are you, still throwing tantrums like a child?" "I want Lily to feed me." After Lily Rowan became Julian's fiancée, she had behaved very well around Grandpa Thornton, to the point that Lily had become an obsession for the old man. He had already decided Lily was Julian's wife. He didn't recognize anyone else. Julian said sternly, "She ran away. She won't be coming back." "Impossible. Lily is a good child." Grandpa Thornton didn't believe it. Oliver said, "Grandpa, please eat something." Grandpa Thornton huffed, turned his head away, and refused. Chapter 13. An appalling woman. "Isn't Lily right here? I knew Lily was a good child." Grace? Was Grandpa Thornton mistaking her for Lily Rowan? For some reason, the old man's gaze felt incredibly warm and familiar. Grandpa Thornton said to Julian, "I want Lily to feed me." Julian glanced at Grace. "You come here." Grace walked over, took the bowl from his hand, and said to Grandpa Thornton, "Okay, Grandpa, I'll feed you." She sat down and began feeding Grandpa Thornton. The previously stubborn old man ate very obediently. Julian sat nearby, watching this scene, a wave of relief washing over him. He looked at Grace. She was very gentle while feeding him. Perhaps this was fate. He hadn't expected Grandpa to like her so much. Letting her marry him turned out to have unexpected benefits. Ethan had finished wiping the water off himself with a towel. Seeing Grace feeding Grandpa Thornton, who was eating so obediently, he frowned. What was the meaning of this? Every time he and Linda came to see Grandpa Thornton, they never had a good experience. Yet the moment she arrived, the old man liked her this much. He must be blind while eating, Grandpa Thornton asked Grace. "Lily, when are you two getting married?" Grace glanced at Julian and said to Grandpa Thornton, "Julian and I are already married." Ethan stood aside, looking at her sarcastically. "Tusk, she and Julian married?" She actually dared to say that although Julian was currently in a wheelchair, a cripple, he would absolutely never marry Grace. However, hearing Grace's words, Julian didn't refute them. Ethan knew Julian wasn't refuting it merely to appease Grandpa Thornton, so he also kept quiet. Grandpa Thornton looked at Grace, very excited. "Good, married is good, have grandchildren soon." Grace listened to Grandpa Thornton's words and agreed, "Okay." Perhaps because seeing Grace made him happy, Grandpa Thornton ate an extra small bowl of rice today, surprising even the caregiver. After finishing the meal, Grandpa Thornton saw Julian just sitting aside, not talking much, seemingly uninterested in his wife. He said to Julian, "You, come here." Julian moved closer. Grandpa Thornton said, "All day long with that stern face, don't even know how to treat your wife better." As he spoke, he pulled Julian's hand over and placed it together with Grace's. Their hands were forced together. Julian's fingers were long and slender, his nails neatly trimmed. As Grace's fingers were held by him, the warmth quickly spread. Grandpa Thornton held their hands together, talking all the while. eager for them to have children soon, looking nothing like the delirious, mad old man who had made Linda and Ethan miserable just moments ago. Ethan stood aside, watching their forced hand holding, his eyes darkening. This woman, truly shameless. So casual, letting Julian hold her hand. Crucially, she didn't even struggle when Julian held her hand. Wasn't it disgusting? After feeding Grandpa and staying at the hospital with him for a while, Grace went to the restroom. She turned on the tap, watching the water flow, washing her fingers. She felt her hand was somewhat uncomfortable, hot, the places touched by Julian feeling scorched. She patted her face. After all, she was married to Julian now. Sometimes, such play acting was necessary. She needed to be mentally prepared. She tidied herself up and came out of the restroom. Just as she was about to return to the ward, someone suddenly approached from the side, grabbed her, and dragged her into the stairwell. Grace was stunned for a moment, looking at the man before her. "Ethan Shaw, are you sick?" Ethan looked at her flushed cheeks. "Aren't you shameless? What did you say?" Grace looked at him in disbelief. Ethan let out a light laugh. "Having Julian hold your hand made you very happy, right? He held it for so long, didn't see you struggle at all. Are you that cheap, anyone can touch you?" Grace looked at him incredulously. "Whether Julian holds my hand or not, what does it have to do with you? Who do you think you are? Did he have any clue about their relationship these past 2 years? She holds hands with someone else now, and he comes to yell at her." Ethan said, "It has nothing to do with me. I'm just reminding you, even in a wheelchair, Julian Thornton is not someone you can climb up to. It was only because the old man mistook you for Lily Rowan that he pretended to hold your hand. Don't tell me you actually think you're Julian Thornton's woman now." His contemptuous gaze made Grace find it laughable. "Someone like you could marry Linda Lockwood. What's wrong with me wanting to marry Julian Thornton? You really want to marry Julian Thornton?" He was just saying it. He didn't expect Grace actually had such thoughts. What if I really do marry him? What can you do about it? She was already legally married to Julian. Even if it was fake, so what? Ethan said, "Then marry him and let me see someone like you. Julian would take an interest in you. Does he know you have 2 children at home? Does he know you're divorced? So what if I'm divorced? Who hasn't encountered a few scumbags when they were young? As if you haven't been divorced yourself. Does this mean Linda Lockwood doesn't know about your divorce?" Grace looked at Ethan. Seeing how nervous he was, she suddenly seemed to understand something. It seemed Linda really didn't know. No wonder Ethan was so tense the moment he saw her. She said, "How about I have a chat with Linda Lockwood? She likes you so much, she should be very interested in your past." "You dare?" Ethan grabbed her wrist, pinning her against the wall. "If you dare say a single word to her, I'll make those 2 children of yours pay the price." "You want to harm my children?" Grace's face darkened instantly. She looked at this man in disbelief. Back when they were still in her womb, Ethan couldn't tolerate them. Now that the children were born, what right did he have? Ethan said, "So, don't force me." "What did I force you to do?" Grace retorted. "Weren't you the one who came looking for me just now? What business is it of yours if I hold hands with Julian Thornton? Stay away from him." Ethan said, "Seeing you try to seduce him irritates me. You're already a mother of 2, still hooking up with others outside. You give him acupuncture, why come to the hospital? Isn't it just to get close to Julian to gain his sympathy?" Her scheming was really quite deep, knowing to start with the old man. Listening to Ethan's words, Grace was simply speechless. He could marry Linda Lockwood, but she couldn't even hold hands with Julian Thornton. She said, "Just holding his hand irritates you. What if I were to sleep with him?" Chapter 14. Actually found her attractive, you dare. Before Grace could finish, Ethan interrupted her. "Have some decency, will you? Isn't it just about money? I'll give it to you. Is this enough? Is it enough now?" As he spoke, he actually took out his wallet, pulled out cash from inside, and stuffed it into her hand. "Stop embarrassing yourself out here." Grace looked at the money he stuffed into her hand. It looked like about $2,000. People rarely used cash nowadays. She was quite surprised he had so much on him. But he was giving her money just so she wouldn't be with Julian Thornton. It was utterly ridiculous. His behavior strongly resembled how he used to act jealous when she talked to other men. He could sulk for an entire day. Back then, she treated him well and liked him, so if he didn't like her talking to other men, she would keep her distance. But Grace never expected that. Even now, his rotten temper remained. Only now, such actions were simply laughable. Who was he? Did he still think he was her husband? Just as Grace was about to speak, her phone rang. She took it out and saw it was a call from Julian Thornton. She glanced at Ethan and answered the call. Mr. Thornton. Seeing her answer the phone, Ethan instantly fell silent. He didn't dare let anyone know he was involved with Grace. Over the phone, Julian's voice was magnetic and deep. "Where are you?" Going to the restroom, and taking this long to return, Grace said, "Coming right back." She hung up, glanced at Ethan, and threw the money in her hand back at his face. "Keep this money for yourself." "I don't need it." With that, she walked out of the stairwell door. Ethan watched her retreating back, gritted his teeth, and kicked the nearby wall. Grace returned to the ward. Grandpa Thornton had finished eating, learned about Julian's marriage, was in a good mood, and had already fallen asleep. Julian saw her walk in, looked up at her, and asked, "Where did you go?" Grace replied, "Just went to the restroom." "That long?" "Constipated." Julian's face darkened. He found this woman truly. He said, "Let's go back." Linda said, "I wonder where Ethan went." He went out too. Hearing this, Oliver glanced at Grace. Could it be he went looking for Grace? However, he wasn't one to meddle, nor would he say such things in front of everyone. He said to Linda, "Then, Miss Lockwood, are you coming back with us?" Linda said, "You guys go ahead, I'll wait for him." "Okay, goodbye." After saying this, Oliver accompanied Julian out of the ward, and Grace followed. Julian's car was parked at the entrance. The three of them got in. Grace sat beside Julian, gently rubbing her wrist. She suspected it was bruised. Ethan's grip was strong, and her skin was the type that bruised easily. When they were together before, he had been very good to her, very gentle, just like he was now with Linda. But now, the moment he saw her, he acted like an enemy, wishing he could strangle her. Every time they spoke, she felt like he might actually kill her. Julian sat beside her, seemingly in a good mood. He spoke, "It's rare to see Grandpa this happy. He likes you very much." Grace glanced at him. "Perhaps it's because I've met him before." "You've met my grandfather?" Julian was somewhat surprised. "He visited my home when I was little, so I met him then. But I had forgotten about it until I saw him again." Thinking about Grandpa Thornton getting sick because Lily Rowan angered him made Grace feel very ashamed. She said to Julian, "Regarding Lily Rowan's matter, I am truly sorry." Hearing her apologize, Julian looked at this woman. For some reason, she seemed much more agreeable than Lily Rowan. He asked, "You said my grandfather visited your home?" Grace nodded. "Yes, I was very young then. He only visited once. But he did say back then that I should marry his grandson later. If I'm not mistaken, the person he meant should be you." Listening to her description, Julian said, "Hearing you say that, it seems Grandpa initially wanted you. But you agreed to him, yet married someone else?" When he said this, his expression was critical, and his tone seemed to be holding her accountable for marrying someone else. Grace said, "That was so long ago, who knows? We lost contact afterward. Besides, times have changed. Marriage is between two people. How can it be decided just by elders?" Julian had precisely listened to his grandfather's words and agreed to Lily Rowan as his fiancée back then. Now, hearing Grace say this felt like a veiled criticism. He retorted, "So you pursued love freely, and what was the result? Still ended up divorced?" Hearing him mention her divorce, Grace stiffened. His words instantly ruined her good mood. She pressed her lips together and looked away. "Yes, I was blind." Back then, to have fallen for Ethan Shaw, to have married him, thinking she had married for love. Grace sat aside, head lowered, feeling an overwhelming urge to cry. Julian watched her, not expecting his words would upset her so much. He pulled out a tissue and handed it to her. "Don't cry, it's my fault. I shouldn't have brought it up. Divorce is divorce, what's the big deal? You'll meet someone better in the future." He wasn't good at comforting people, but he didn't want to make a woman cry because of him. He hated seeing women cry the most. The car arrived at the Thornton residence. Grace had finished crying. Sitting there, she felt embarrassed for having cried in front of Julian. "Sorry, I lost my composure." Seeing she had finally stopped crying, Julian felt relieved. "All right, let's get out." He really had a loose tongue. Why bring up her divorce out of the blue? Grace opened the car door and got out. Oliver helped Julian out of the car and into the wheelchair, pushing him inside. Entering the room, Grace began preparing for the evening acupuncture session. She wasn't in a good mood and just wanted to finish quickly and go home. She had already spent the entire day with Julian. Julian sat aside, watching her quietly bowing her head, seemingly still upset. Julian wasn't good at coaxing women. Feeling the silent atmosphere was very awkward, he took the initiative to speak. "Dr. Rowan, I'd like some water." Hearing his words, Grace glanced at him. Was he asking her to pour him water? She lowered her head and continued working. "Pouring water shouldn't be within my duties." Her responsibility was only to treat him. Julian said, "Taking care of me should be your duty as my wife." Chapter 15. 20,000 a month, as long as we're not divorced, you are my wife, Julian stated. "I hope Dr. Rowan can have that awareness. I married you not to have you as mere decoration." Grace looked at Julian. For some reason, his words made her want to quit. She was clearly just a hostage. How did she also become a slave? But she still went to pour him water. Not because she was afraid of him, but mainly because she didn't want to hear him nag endlessly over a cup of water. She placed the water on the table in front of him. "Before acupuncture, I don't like listening to nagging. It affects my state of mind. Then my needle placement might not be accurate." "Are you threatening me?" Julian looked at her. She actually dared to use this to threaten him. She was really infuriating. "Yes, Mr. Thornton. It seems you're not entirely slow. You actually understood." Grace smirked. Bantering with him a bit surprisingly improved her mood. After speaking, she turned back to continue sterilizing and preparing. Julian finished his water, resting his chin on his hand, watching the busy Grace. Just moments ago she was crying, yet when she spoke, she could infuriate someone to death. Although she shared the surname Rowan with Lily, she and Lily were definitely two different kinds of people. Lily Rowan had always been timid and subservient in his presence, terrified of offending him. Like an appendage without its own thoughts, constantly revolving around him, guessing what he liked and disliked. Grace, however, was different. She wasn't a flamboyant person. She possessed all the necessary politeness, but she wouldn't deliberately cater to others either. Come to think of it, she was the marriage partner his grandfather had initially chosen for him. If she hadn't been divorced, perhaps she would have been more suitable as his wife. Unfortunately, he truly had no interest in divorced women. "We can begin now," Grace finished preparing and said to Julian. Oliver had returned earlier but had some business and hadn't come back yet. So today's acupuncture session involved only her and Julian. Grace asked, "Do you need help taking off your pants?" For acupuncture, he needed to remove his pants as the needles targeted his legs. Previously, Oliver had always helped. Hearing Grace's words now, Julian glanced at her. No need. Letting this woman take off his pants felt strange. Since he was unwilling, Grace didn't insist. His legs were inconvenient. Lending him a hand wouldn't have been difficult. For her, it was just work. But this Mr. Thornton was probably too proud to accept help. Grace waited nearby for a while, watching him struggle immensely to take off his pants. Ever since becoming disabled in both legs, he needed a wheelchair to get around, and daily life was full of inconveniences. For the perpetually proud Julian Thornton, his life felt like it had been instantly destroyed. Like a bird with broken wings, like a fish out of water. Grace watched from the side, suddenly feeling a bit sorry for him. Danny and Davy could now dress themselves, but for this Mr. Thornton, it had become a very difficult task. After the acupuncture ended, Oliver still hadn't returned. Grace reached out and helped him pull up his pants. Julian looked up, glancing at this woman. Oliver had always taken care of him. Now this woman meddling made him uncomfortable. He immediately grabbed her hand, feeling as if he had suffered a great insult. Grace looked at him. "Mr. Thornton?" What was he doing grabbing her hand all of a sudden? Julian glared at her. "Who asked you to help me? Helping those in need is a traditional virtue of our nation." Her face was calm. "I don't need it," Julian snapped. "Meddlesome." "All right then," Grace said. "I'll help you take them off and you can put them back on yourself." As she spoke, she made a move to do so. This action angered Julian even more. He tightened his grip on her wrist. "Woman, are you deliberately trying to provoke me?" Just because he had poked her sore spot earlier, she was now humiliating him. Hearing his words, Grace said, "I thought Mr. Thornton only had problems with his legs. Now it seems your brain needs checking too." Julian retorted, "You're the first woman who dares to speak to me like this. Do you think I can't live without you now, that I absolutely need you? Believe it or not, with just one word from me, your Rowan family will go bankrupt, with no hope of recovery." Although Grace hadn't interacted with the Thornton family before, since she came to work here, she naturally understood the influence the Thornton family held in Sea City. This Julian Thornton was certainly a man whose word was law. He could undoubtedly do the things he mentioned. Grace said, "I was just speaking a few truths. It seems Mr. Thornton can't take it. I helped you put on your pants simply because I felt you needed it. Your legs are inconvenient now, so I helped you out. You don't even say thank you and instead get angry at me. Judge for yourself, are you being reasonable?" Julian remained silent. Grace continued, "Your legs are disabled now, but your heart is even more insecure. You interpret any bit of care from others as an insult to you, and you get angry because of it. Am I wrong? If that's the case, is there anything wrong with me saying your brain needs checking?" Hearing her words, Julian was furious, but for some reason, he also felt like she had struck a chord deep inside. He wanted to retort, but couldn't find the words for a moment. He could only release her hand sullenly ever since his accident. People around him had been tiptoeing around the issue. They didn't dare offend him, didn't dare say anything harsh, didn't even dare mention the word disabled. They just tried hard to protect him, afraid his feelings would get hurt. But this appalling woman, it was like she was afraid he didn't know he was disabled, constantly bringing it up. She could truly anger him to death. Grace said, "Being disabled in both legs is nothing to be ashamed of. Life is like that. Nobody knows whether tomorrow or an accident will come first. When it happens, what can we do but face it? No one will discriminate against you because of it. In fact, even in a wheelchair, Mr. Thornton, you're still better off than most people. Why do you need to be so sensitive?" Julian glanced at her. "They won't. Look at Lily Rowan." Speaking of which, his current state was partly due to that woman. When he was fine before, she was all flattery. The moment he had an accident, she immediately left. It made Julian doubt himself for a moment. Grace said, "That's not your problem, it's hers. Lily Rowan discriminates against many things. She can't stand seeing others better or more successful than her. Would you feel inferior just because you're more successful than her?" After hearing Grace's words, Julian was somewhat surprised. It seemed she had deep insights regarding Lily Rowan. Seeing him staring at her, Grace didn't know if he was still angry. Anyway, she had said what needed to be said. Chapter 16, Pre-tax or post-tax, she said, "I'll head back for today. I'll come again tomorrow. Until the Rowan family goes bankrupt, I will still complete my duties." After saying this, she packed her things and walked out the door. Julian stared at her retreating back. She was wearing a white shirt today, paired with a black skirt. When she walked, her back was straight. Having practiced dance since childhood, she looked like an elegant white swan. Julian reached out and gripped the armrest of the sofa beside him, realizing he must be crazy to actually find this woman. Somewhat attractive. The thought had barely surfaced before he extinguished it. Grace returned downstairs. Mrs. Thornton was talking with Oliver. Seeing her come down, Mrs. Thornton looked at her and asked, "Dr. Rowan, how is Julian?" "He's fine, upstairs. Today's acupuncture session is finished, so I'll be heading back." "Oliver, see Dr. Rowan home." Mrs. Thornton looked at Grace. "You've worked hard today." Putting aside the matter of Grace marrying Julian in Mrs. Thornton's mind, Grace was just an acupuncturist, and she treated her very politely. Grace nodded. Oliver led her out the door. She had been running around all day and felt tired. Usually at home, she would take a nap with the babies. Grace sat in the car, relieved that she could finally go home. Oliver glanced at her. "Madam worked hard today." "Madam?" Grace looked at him. Oliver said, "Since you've married the third master, you are naturally his wife. Don't you know it's just temporary? But in front of others, we still need to keep up appearances." Grace didn't have the energy to argue with him, so she let him have his way. "Whatever makes you happy," Oliver asked. "By the way, do you know Ethan Shaw?" Hearing Oliver's question, Grace paused, thinking of that man. She asked, "Why do you ask?" Oliver replied, "Just asking casually. Although this is your private matter, but since Madam has married the third master, it's best to be cautious. With other men, at least maintain some distance, lest someone sees and it reflects poorly on the third master." Their marriage was fake, but others didn't know. In front of outsiders, appearances must be maintained. Grace was certain Oliver must have seen something. Grace said, "Rest assured, Ethan Shaw and I will not have any misleading relationship in the future. If there was any relationship, It would be that of enemies she would never forgive him in this lifetime, Oliver said. With your assurance, I feel relieved. After chatting with him, Grace saw he stopped talking and just drove seriously, so she closed her eyes too. Resting in the car for a while, her phone rang. It was her stepmother. Grace answered the phone. Hello. Vivian said, Grace, how are things with you and Julian Thornton? Although Grace's words before leaving the hospital had infuriated her, now, thinking about the Rowan family's situation, she put aside her previous grievances, her tone becoming polite again. Grace said, It's handled. The family should be fine for now. Let my dad know, tell him not to worry. Her father only had her as a biological daughter. If something happened to the family, if she didn't take care of it, no one else would. So she wouldn't try to evade it. Hearing this, Vivian beamed. Really? You married Julian Thornton? Grace said. Yes. Her stepmother was probably thinking in her heart again that marrying Julian Thornton was a stroke of luck for her. Anyway, in her stepmother's eyes, she deserved to marry poorly, while her own daughter deserved to marry much better than her. Indeed, after hearing Grace married Julian Thornton, Vivian's tone brightened considerably. She said, although Julian Thornton's legs are crippled, the Thornton family is still quite good. You two live well together from now on. I'll let your dad know. With that, Vivian hung up. Grace looked at her phone, thinking, if the news of her marriage to Julian spread, Lily Rowan should come back, right? Lily Rowan was a mama's girl. Her mother spoiled her rot. Even at her age, she couldn't be away from her mother for a day, needing her mother to take care of her. Because of the Julian Thornton incident she had been hiding for so long, it really wasn't easy for her. It was precisely because she thought Lily might return if she married Julian that Grace had agreed to marry him. Getting out of Oliver's car, Grace bought a few things at the downstairs supermarket before carrying them home. Wendy had already gone back. She lived far from here and needed to take the subway to get to work early tomorrow morning. Now, only the two babies were home. Grace entered and saw, goodness, Danny was washing dishes and Davy was cooking noodles. The stove was a bit high, both were standing on stools. Grace looked at this scene, her heart aching slightly. She quickly picked up Davy, who was cooking noodles. Davy, didn't I tell you not to touch these things? It's not safe. What if you get burned? Davy struggled in her arms. Mommy, let me go quickly, I'm cooking noodles, almost done. Can you please not interfere? Grace felt faint. I'm worried you'll get burned. How did that become me interfering? I won't get burned. Davy said, cooking noodles is such a simple thing, I know how. Davy, how old are you? Talking like a little adult? Davy said righteously, 4 years old. Not a 3-year-old toddler anymore. Grace remembered when she was 4, she couldn't do anything. Her mother was still around then, making various loving meals for her and her father every day. Now Davy even knew how to cook noodles. It showed how derelict she had been as a mother. Sometimes when working outside, like today, she clearly wanted to come back early, but she couldn't, only returning late. The two babies at home were like two diligent little bees. Davy said, you should go out quickly. The kitchen is so small, you coming in makes it crowded. After his dismissive remark, he tried to climb back onto the stool. Grace said, no need, Danny. Davy, you two go outside together. Leave this to Mommy. No, Davy refused. Danny said, Mommy, we can do it. You worked hard. Danny and I will do the housework together from now on. Grace looked at these two little treasures, who didn't seem to be joking at all. It was simply. In the end, the three of them worked together and finished cooking the noodles. The three sat down at the dining table and ate noodles together. While eating, Davy asked, Mommy, are you going out again tomorrow? Yes, Grace said. Mommy has work recently treating an uncle. Davy, is that uncle handsome? Grace paused. Why do you ask? If he's handsome, can he give you chapter 17? Davy is very cunning, Danny said. If he needs Mommy to treat him, his health must not be good. Unhealthy people are not acceptable. Mommy works too hard. She needs someone who can take care of her. Listening to the two of them go back and forth, planning her life out for her, Grace was speechless. What have you two been learning? So young, yet they knew everything already. After eating with the two babies, Grace took them to wash up, and then they went to sleep. She still had to send the two babies to school tomorrow. Because Grace was raising them alone, the two babies started kindergarten at the age of 2. This way, when she went out to work, the children wouldn't be left home unattended. The next day, because she had to send the two children to school, Grace arrived at the Thornton residence a bit late. Mrs. Goodwin opened the door for her. Grace said, "Sorry, I was late sending the kids to school." She disliked being late, but for the sake of her children, she really had no choice. Mrs. Goodwin smiled. "It's all right. The old master came back today, everyone is here. Julian's grandfather is back?" "Yes." Hearing it was Grandpa Thornton, Grace felt pleased. She quite wanted to see this elderly gentleman. She walked in the door and found the entire family in the living room. The family surrounded Grandpa Thornton, who had just returned from the hospital. Ethan Shaw and Linda Lockwood were also there. The two sat on the sofa. Linda looked at Grandpa Thornton. "Grandpa really looks much better today. Completely different from when they first saw him yesterday." Mrs. Thornton said, "Isn't that right?" It had been a long time since they had seen Grandpa Thornton this lucid, so now the whole family was very happy. Grandpa Thornton sat aside, scowling. "Where's Lily?" He came back specifically to see his granddaughter-in-law. But after returning, he found she was nowhere to be seen. He couldn't help but suspect that Julian and the others had lied to him. Yesterday, the two hadn't gotten married at all. Julian sat nearby, rubbing his temples. Oliver said, "Soon, she'll be here soon." Grace walked in from outside. Grandpa Thornton was the first to spot her, smiling like a flower. "Lily." The moment he saw Grace, he became exceptionally warm and welcoming, no longer scowling like before. Linda said, "Dr. Rowan, come quickly. Grandpa has been asking for you since he got back this morning." Because Grandpa Thornton liked Grace, Linda's attitude towards Grace had improved as well. After all, she was the only one who could calm Grandpa Thornton down. Julian glanced at her. "You're late." If she hadn't been late, Grandpa wouldn't have been making a fuss for so long. Grace felt embarrassed. "Something came up, sorry." Just as she finished speaking, she saw Grandpa Thornton use his cane to tap Julian. "How dare you yell at your wife, Julian?" He had only said one sentence. Grace was also surprised. She herself didn't feel Julian was yelling, especially since she was the one who was late. She hadn't expected Grandpa to be so protective of her. She had forgotten how long it had been since someone protected her like this. Grace walked over to Grandpa's side and said, "Grandpa, I'm sorry something came up. I arrived late." Grandpa said, it's all right. Business is important. Have you eaten?" Grace was about to say she had, but heard Mrs. Thornton say, "Have breakfast with Grandpa first. He hasn't eaten breakfast today. It's all ready, he just refused to eat." She hadn't expected Grandpa Thornton to like Grace so much either. When Linda mentioned it earlier, she thought it wasn't true. Grace nodded. "Okay, Grandpa, let's go eat." Grandpa, who had been refusing to eat just moments ago, now followed Grace's lead to the dining room and sat down. The family had been bustling all morning, just waiting for this meal. Ethan was also starving. The family sat down in the dining room. Grace sat beside Grandpa, but as soon as she sat down, he said to her, "Lily, you sit over there." Grace glanced across the table, her eyes pausing. It was none other than the seat next to Julian. She said to Grandpa, "I'll just sit here and accompany you." "No, you sit over there." Grandpa Thornton just wanted to see her, and Julian being affectionate now. Grace felt awkward. As she hesitated, she heard Mrs. Thornton say, "Go sit over there. Grandpa definitely wants to see you and Julian sitting together. He most hopes Julian gets married soon." Grace had no choice but to stand up and walk over to the seat beside Julian. As soon as she sat down, she noticed Ethan's eyes constantly staring at her. Ethan had been starving, but now seeing Grace sit next to Julian, he felt like he was full from anger, even though he had warned her at the hospital yesterday. How long was she going to keep playing this fake marriage game? Grace initially felt a bit uncomfortable, but for some reason, seeing Ethan's expression now, she suddenly felt at ease again. Not only that, she looked at Julian beside her and proactively asked, "You didn't eat breakfast this morning?" Ethan didn't want to see her being close to Julian. She wouldn't let him have his way. Julian replied, "No." Julian glanced at Grace. It was because she was late that things dragged on until now, yet she could still smile. He frowned. "How can you smile?" Grace said. "Sorry, I'll try not to be late next time. Here, eat more." She actively served him food, looking very attentive. In Ethan's eyes, she was seducing Julian. He picked up his water, took a sip, desperately trying to suppress the dissatisfaction in his heart. He initiated a topic, asking, Will Grandpa be living at home from now on? The old man wasn't mentally stable and had been living in the hospital. As long as he didn't come back, Grace wouldn't have the chance to get close to Julian, so he was very concerned about this. Mrs. Thornton said, the doctor said he expressed a desire to come home, and living at home might be beneficial for his condition. The Thornton family respected Grandpa Thornton greatly. Even though he was old, they didn't see him as a burden or think of dumping him in the hospital. If possible, they were very willing to live with Grandpa. Hearing Mrs. Thornton's words, Ethan said, I still think living in the hospital is better. The doctors are more professional. He just got a little better. What if coming back makes it worse? That wouldn't be good. Julian sat aside. Hearing Ethan's words, he frowned. He looked at Ethan. Does Grandpa coming back bother you? Although Grandpa Thornton was often confused and liked to cause trouble, Julian still very much wanted him to live at home. After all, Grandpa was old. Every day spent together counted. But Ethan's words sounded like he wanted to send Grandpa back to the hospital, which annoyed him greatly. Chapter 18. She's not interested in your man. Ethan hadn't expected Julian to get angry and quickly explained. No, third uncle, that's not what I meant. I'm just concerned for Grandpa's well-being. Linda also chimed in. Third uncle, Ethan didn't mean it. He's also very concerned about Grandpa. Please don't be angry. Linda was very afraid Julian would get angry at Ethan. Hearing Linda plead, Julian finally reined in his anger. Being scolded by Julian put Ethan in a bad mood. It proved that even marrying Linda didn't guarantee him an easy life with the Thorntons. In this family, besides Linda, no one else seemed to like him much. Crucially, he constantly had to watch the expression of this crippled Julian, which made him very unhappy. He quickly finished his meal and went outside to smoke. Grace sat aside, watching the arrogant Ethan being as timid as a grandson in front of Julian. For some reason, her mood suddenly became exceptionally good. After Ethan left, Grandpa Thornton ate for a while, looked up, saw Julian and Grace sitting together, and asked Mrs. Thornton, "When is their wedding?" Mrs. Thornton replied, "I'm already preparing for the wedding. It will be arranged as soon as possible. Then hurry up." Grandpa Thornton was extremely anxious. Mrs. Thornton said, "I know." She glanced at Julian and Grace. Since they were already registered, they did indeed need to prepare for a wedding. Grace saw Mrs. Thornton look towards her and paused. Although Mrs. Thornton said they would hold a wedding, she thought it was just casual talk. Now, looking at Mrs. Thornton's reaction, why did she feel like Mrs. Thornton genuinely intended to hold a wedding? After accompanying Grandpa to eat and then helping him upstairs to rest, Grace and Julian returned to his room for acupuncture. During the session, she asked, "Your mom isn't really going to hold a wedding for us, is she?" Julian replied, "Grandpa wants to see it." "So we're really doing it?" Grace asked, finding it hard to believe. Julian countered, "What else?" Grace refused. "There's too much involved in a wedding, I don't have time. You should tell your mom clearly beforehand." Lest Mrs. Thornton waste her efforts, Julian said, "Miss Rowan, we're already registered. A wedding is appropriate. Even if you have to squeeze, you need to make time." No time. That excuse wouldn't fly with him. Grace didn't expect that getting registered involved so many things. "Mr. Thornton, I don't want to get married anymore. Can I change my mind now?" "Change your mind?" Julian looked at her. "We're already registered, and now you tell me you regret it. Why did you agree to marry me in the first place?" "That's because," Grace explained, "I thought that by getting married and spreading the news, Lily Rowan would come back. How was I supposed to know there would be a wedding too? How about you talk to them, postpone it. That way, we won't have to hold a wedding later." "What do you think?" Julian said. "According to your logic, I think this wedding needs to happen quickly. Only when Lily Rowan sees the wedding will she believe we are truly married." Grace felt her temples throb. "Why are you joining in the fuss too? Holding a wedding involves many things. Do you think it's that easy? Where would I find the time?" She had been married before and knew how cumbersome weddings were. She never wanted to go through it again in this lifetime. Then from now on, give all your time to me. "Do you think I'm like you?" Grace retorted. "Taken care of by someone every day, not having to worry about food or clothing. I still have 2 children. Besides giving you acupuncture, I also need to earn money to raise them. I'm busy." Spending all her time on him. What about the 2 children? What about next month's rent? Their rent was paid every 3 months. After this month, rent was due. She originally came to treat Julian thinking the pay from the Thornton family would be good. With that money, she wouldn't have to worry about rent. But then, because of her family's issues, she waived the treatment fees. She still needed to find other ways to make money. Julian looked at her and said magnanimously, "After all that, you just want money, right? As long as you behave, make Grandpa happy, make my family happy, I will give you money. Will it be less than what you earn outside?" "Oh, okay," Grace answered quickly. If there was money, what else was there to say? Julian. He had thought this woman would coolly refuse him, but she agreed so readily. He almost suspected this woman had deliberately tricked him. Forget it, it was just money. He could afford it, he said. "As long as I call you, and you can arrive anytime, anywhere, I can give you $200,000 a month." $200,000? Grace's eyes widened in disbelief. Julian snorted. $200,000 isn't low. Women shouldn't be greedy. Grace? She didn't think it was low, she just hadn't expected Julian to be so generous with money, just accompanying him to deal with his family, pretending to be his wife, and she could get $200,000 a month. She had tried various jobs before to raise her children. Although she had interviewed for well-paying jobs like programmer, those jobs required sacrificing one's life. She had to take care of her children and couldn't do it. Later, working as an acupuncturist, she met decent clients and could earn a good rate, barely allowing her to live comfortably. But she never expected to suddenly join the ranks of those earning $200,000 a month. Looking at Julian now, she felt he radiated a golden light. "A sugar daddy?" she asked. "Is the $200,000 pre-tax or post-tax?" Julian paused, glanced at her, feeling offended. "Of course, it's before sleep you still want after sleep. I warn you, although I said you're my wife, that's only in daily life. Don't even think about other things, Grace." Where did this man's mind go? Forget it, pre-tax was pre-tax. It was still a lot. After finishing the acupuncture, Grace immediately started to leave. Julian said, "Come back." Grace glanced at her sugar daddy. "Mr. Thornton, what is it?" Thinking about the money he promised, suddenly none of his requests felt excessive anymore. Julian said, "Put my pants on." Oliver was also absent today. But because he had thrown a fit about this yesterday, Grace hadn't proactively done anything to displease him like she did before. Unexpectedly, he was now proactively asking her to help him. Grace walked over, helped him put on his pants, remembered yesterday's incident and said, "Weren't you quite angry yesterday?" "I thought about it, maybe you had a point." Julian's words sounded a bit sarcastic, making it unclear whether it was praise or compliment. Before Grace could reply, he said, "From now on, you will do this. Putting on pants. Sure, as long as you add money, you are my Chapter 19. This is your third." Aunt Grace had already helped him put on his pants. She glanced at him. "Do you want some water?" "If you don't want to give money, fine, but why resort to insults?" Julian said, "Yes." Grace went to pour him water, brought it back, and handed it to him. Julian looked at her, his eyes wary, as if afraid she might pounce on him. Seeing her standing nearby watching him, he said, "When you have nothing to do, stay away from me." "Okay." Grace obediently moved away. She didn't want to be close to him either. Julian, seeing her being so obedient, he felt something was off. In the afternoon, Grace picked up Danny and Davy from kindergarten on time. Because Julian had promised her a salary, she was in a good mood and took Danny and Davy to eat sushi, which was usually expensive and she couldn't afford, but the babies loved it. "Mommy, did you win the lottery?" Davy asked Grace in the restaurant. Danny also looked at Grace curiously. Something was off. Mommy actually brought them to eat sushi, Grace. She cleared her throat and explained to the two babies, "Mommy found a job and the boss is quite generous." "Does the boss like you?" Davy asked. Grace. She shot Davy a look. "What nonsense are you talking? My mommy is so pretty, it's normal for the boss to like you. But Mommy, you need to protect yourself. I don't want you to meet another bad man." The use of "another" was particularly insightful, reminding Grace of Ethan Shaw. Speaking of Ethan Shaw, as if arranged by fate, she actually saw him. He was accompanied by Linda Lockwood, who clung to his arm, looking like a dependent little bird beside him. Today, his family was out for dinner. Linda was treating, but she was worried about gaining weight, so she invited the family out for Japanese food. Also present were Ethan's sister and brother-in-law. Their child was about a year older than Danny and Davy. It was because their child was born that Ethan's mother became impatient, urging Grace and Ethan to have children. That's when Ethan came up with the plan, leading to the subsequent series of events. She never expected that taking her children out today, she would run into them here. The manager found them a private room suitable for a family. The group walked over, attracting attention. Ethan had Linda on his arm, chatting about something. Suddenly, his face darkened as he saw Grace sitting right there. From afar, he could see two children sitting opposite her. This woman. She was truly a persistent ghost. Constantly annoying him at the Thornton house was bad enough. Now he comes out for a meal with his family, and she has to follow and bring the kids. Could it be she deliberately brought them here to provoke Linda and drive a wedge between them? He escorted his family and Linda to the private room door but didn't go in. He said to Linda, "You go in first, I need to use the restroom." Linda nodded, "Okay." Then she went inside with his family. Only then did Ethan turn back. Grace had almost finished eating. Mainly because she had to go to the Thornton house later, she needed to send the two children home first. Seeing Ethan just now made her want to leave even faster. But, just as she gathered her things, put hats and masks on the two babies, and took them to the restroom first, while she waited outside, Ethan came over. "You really are a persistent ghost." His tone sounded as if she owed him money. Grace saw him approach and said coldly, "Don't make it sound like I deliberately followed you here." Ethan walked up to her, gritting his teeth. "You brought the two children here just to spite me, didn't you?" Grace almost laughed at his theory. "I came here first. I was almost finished eating when you arrived. How is this my fault?" Ethan retorted, "You knew I was coming, so you waited here beforehand. Am I wrong?" The events at the Thornton house earlier today had already made him uncomfortable. Now she came here to provoke him further. Did she really think he was easy to bully? Grace stared at him quietly, as if looking at an idiot. Seeing her silence, Ethan took it as guilt. "Why aren't you talking? Did I hit a nerve?" Grace said, "I was just wondering how your brain works to think you have that much charm, and I have such great ability to know what you're planning. What, you want to cause a scene? Fine, then go call Linda Lockwood over. Let her see these two children you abandoned. How about that?" Hearing her mention Linda Lockwood, Ethan frowned. He wouldn't involve Linda in his matters with Grace. After all, Linda was tied to his future prospects. He took a cigarette out of his pocket, lit it, took a drag, and then said, "Tell me, what will it take for you to leave the Thornton house and disappear from my sight with the two children? Do you want the house? I can give it to you. Come find me tomorrow. I'll give you the house. But please, from now on, don't appear in front of me again, okay?" He knew she had been pestering him for years, just wanting back the house they shared. He admitted she had some tricks up her sleeve. He was scared of her now, compromised, so he'd give her the house. Grace looked at him. After their divorce, that house had been in his mother's possession. He had always refused to give it to her, even avoiding meeting her, only letting his mother deal with her. She never expected he would offer her the house now. Unfortunately, she didn't want it anymore. Grace said, "You keep the house, I'm not interested." She was staying at the Thorntons only because of her family's situation. Did he really think it was just because of him? Even if he really gave her the house, Grace couldn't leave. And of course, she wouldn't leave. What right did this man have to interfere in her life? Ethan said, "Don't push your luck, you'll end up with nothing." "Who says I'll get nothing?" Grace countered. "If I stay at the Thornton house and marry Julian Thornton, you'll have to call me third aunt." "Third aunt?" Ethan scoffed. "Have some shame, someone like you, wanting to marry Julian Thornton. If you can marry him, I'll write my name backwards. Julian Thornton is just putting on an act for his grandfather. It seems you're taking it seriously, forgetting who you are, just because the old man liked her." The Thornton family said a few things, and this woman really got full of herself. She actually thought Julian Thornton would really marry her. Did she even deserve it? Grace looked at him. "Then I look forward to it." Ethan checked the time and said to Grace, "I'm not wasting words with you. I have things to do. If you want the house, come find me obediently tomorrow. We'll both be better off otherwise. In the future, you'll." Chapter 20. Still denying she likes him, she had come out to use the restroom and saw Grace and Ethan there. She rushed over immediately, stood in front of Grace, looking at her warily. "Are you harassing our Ethan again? Have you no shame? You cheating woman, how dare you show your face in front of our Ethan?" Ethan hadn't expected his mother to come out. "Mom, what are you doing out here?" "What am I doing out here?" Eleanor Shaw shot him a look. What are you doing here? Why are you being polite to this woman? You're divorced, stay away from her. Don't let her say a few words, and you soften up again, let me tell you. This kind of woman deserves to have her reputation ruined, to never be able to hold her head high again. Although Ethan was now married to Linda Lockwood, Alina still hadn't forgiven Grace for the alleged cheating incident back then. She still held it against her, scolding her every time they met. Even sometimes at Grace's workplace, Alina would show no mercy, causing a scene just like now. Because Alina was being so loud, passers-by had already started looking over at them. Ethan said, "Mom, don't be like this, don't make a scene. Go back to what you were doing." Linda was still inside. If this blew up and Linda came over, wouldn't she find out about his past with Grace? Now that Grace was also at the Thornton house, Linda would see her every day. Who knew what she would think? Although he also desperately wanted Grace to leave the Thornton house, it had to be without affecting him. Destroying himself along with Grace like this? He wouldn't dare seeing Ethan being so cowardly in front of Grace. Alina became anxious for him. What are you afraid of? Still being so polite to her. This woman cheated on you, betrayed you, and you're still protecting her. Let me tell you, Ethan Shaw, you're married to Linda Lockwood now. Stay away from this woman in the future. You hear me? Don't let her say a few words and you soften up. She was terrified Ethan would have a moment of weakness, forgive Grace, and consequently wrong Linda. She knew that since divorcing Ethan, Grace's life had gone from bad to worse. Like now, the clothes Grace was wearing looked like they cost barely $100. Dirt poor, nothing like before. So it must be that she came back begging Ethan, wanting to return to her comfortable life. Unfortunately, her Ethan would never forgive this cheating woman. Trying to extort money? No way. Thinking this, Alina shouted, "Everyone, come look, this cheating woman, who had 2 children with another man back then, is now trying to seduce my son again. How shameless." Passers-by all looked over, their disdainful gazes falling on Grace. Alina continued, "Unfortunately, after leaving my son, that adulterer ignored her too. Look what state she's in now. It's hilarious now that she sees my son is successful. She wants to come back and beg my son's forgiveness." Dream on. Grace stood aside, feeling the stares of strangers, onlookers, all focused on her. This scene was not unfamiliar to her. Over the past few years, every time she encountered Alina would cause trouble, trying to get her fired, wanting everyone to despise her. It wasn't that she hadn't tried to explain, but no one was willing to believe her. Now, her whole body felt cold, as if she had returned to that desperate, miserable time right after giving birth, abandoned by everyone. Grace looked at Ethan standing beside her. He was always busy with work. How would he know what she had gone through because of him? Fearing the scene would escalate and attract Linda, Ethan looked at his mother. "Mom, stop talking," Alina retorted. "Why stop? Is she feeling wronged now? She's clearly the one who wronged you." "I wronged him," Grace laughed, fury boiling over. "Why don't you ask your son, in what way did I ever wrong him?" Chapter 21. The truth comes out. Alina's shrill voice echoed through the restaurant, drawing glances from many customers. Grace stood rooted to the spot, her face pale, hands unconsciously clenched. Just then, an angry shout cut through the air. Enough. Grace looked up and saw Julian Thornton in his wheelchair, being pushed by Oliver Owen, appearing at the restaurant entrance. Grandpa Thornton and Mrs. Thornton followed behind. Seeing Julian, Ethan panicked. "Third uncle, what are you doing here?" Julian shot him a cold glare, ignored him, and looked at Grace. "Are you okay?" Grace shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. At that moment, Danny and Davy came out of the restroom. Seeing so many people, Davy instinctively hid behind Grace, but Danny's eyes lit up when he saw Julian. "Wheelchair uncle," this exclamation silenced the entire restaurant. Grandpa Thornton looked at Danny and Davy, reaching out a trembling hand. "Are these my great-grandchildren?" Mrs. Thornton's eyes widened too. She finally understood why those children in the live stream felt so familiar. They were spitting images of Julian. As a child, Alina stared at the striking resemblance between the children and Julian, her face turning deathly pale. How is this possible? Ethan was also stunned, slowly realizing something. Grace looked at Julian, her eyes full of confusion. Julian shook his head, indicating he was just as clueless. Oliver suddenly spoke up. "Third master, 4 years ago, while you were recuperating in Switzerland, you once donated sperm." Julian looked at Grace and the two children in shock, then at Ethan. Suddenly, everything clicked. Ethan stammered, I was impotent back then. The doctor said artificial insemination was possible. The babies Grace conceived were never mine biologically. Are you saying these children really aren't yours? Linda Lockwood had appeared sometime during the commotion, her face pale as she looked at Ethan. But you told everyone Grace cheated? I didn't, Ethan argued. Artificial insemination uses outside sperm, isn't that cheating? Enough, Julian roared. The truth is obvious. Ethan Shaw, you used artificial insemination to get Grace pregnant, then framed her for cheating and ruined her reputation. And by coincidence, the donor you chose happened to be me. Eleanor collapsed onto the floor. We wronged her. Chapter 22. A turn of events a week later, the DNA test results came back, confirming that Danny and Davy were indeed Julian Thornton's biological sons. In the living room of the Thornton villa, Arthur Rowan sat on the sofa, staring at the report in front of him, his eyes filled with pain. Grace, Dad was wrong. Grace sat beside him, holding a teacup, her expression calm. Dad, it's not your fault. Ethan Shaw deceived everyone. Julian sat in his wheelchair, watching the two children playing in the yard, his eyes filled with complex emotions. I never thought I'd gain two sons this way, he said softly. Grace looked at him and smiled faintly. They're smart and kind, you'll like them. I already like them, Julian confessed. Perhaps from the first moment I saw them, I felt an inexplicable connection. Just then, Oliver entered. Third Master, Chairman Lockwood is here. Lawrence Lockwood walked in, followed by a shame-faced Lily Rowan. Lily kept her head down, not daring to look at Julian. I'm sorry. I know I made a huge mistake. Julian looked at her, devoid of his past hatred, only indifference remaining. Lily, I don't hate you anymore. If you hadn't run away back then, I might never have discovered I have two amazing sons. Lily looked up, glanced at Grace, then lowered her head again. Chapter 23. Happiness knocks. 3 months later, the Thornton family garden was decorated festively. Thanks to Grace's acupuncture and diligent care, Julian's legs had gradually regained feeling. Today was the day he would attempt to stand without his wheelchair. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Julian slowly used the handrails to pull himself up from the wheelchair. Although his movements were slow, he stood firm. Danny and Davy cheered. Daddy stood up. Grace watched Julian's determined expression, tears welling in her eyes. During this time, they had gone from a fake marriage to the truth being revealed, then to understanding and supporting each other. Unknowingly, genuine feelings had quietly blossomed. After stabilizing himself, Oliver handed Julian a small box. Julian took it, knelt down on one knee with difficulty, and extended his hand towards Grace. Grace, we had a fake marriage once. Now, I want to have a real one with you. Will you marry me? Grace looked at the man before her, tears finally falling. I will. Grandpa Thornton smiled happily, holding his two great-grandsons' hands. Wonderful, I can finally see your family of 4 reunited nearby. Arthur Rowan's eyes reddened, gratified that his daughter had finally found happiness. As for Ethan Shaw, after the truth came out, he was fired from the Lockwood Group, and Linda Lockwood filed for divorce. Eleanor Shaw apologized to Grace for her actions and proactively returned the keys to the house that originally belonged to Grace. Chapter 24. Finally together 1 year later, Grace and Julian formally held their wedding ceremony. Julian's legs had recovered significantly. He could walk short distances without crutches. He personally held Grace's hand as they walked down the aisle, with their 2 sons, dressed in small suits, scattering flower petals ahead of them. Grandpa Thornton watched this scene, his face full of benevolent smiles. Since the truth came out, his condition had miraculously improved. He was now mentally sharp and even started teaching his 2 great-grandsons to play chess. At the wedding, Grace saw her best friend, Wendy Goodwin, chatting animatedly with Oliver Owen. It seemed sparks were flying between these 2 strategists as well. During the banquet, Julian stood up, raised his glass. I thank fate for bringing us together. Although the journey was winding, the destination is exactly what I wanted. Grace, thank you for waiting for me with my children. Thank you for healing my legs, and even more for healing my heart. Grace raised her glass to meet his, her eyes shining with happiness. She had finally found a man who truly loved and respected her. Danny and Davy, now 5 years old, had quickly grown close to Julian after learning he was their biological father. At this moment, they moved among the guests like little gentlemen, greeting everyone, drawing praise from all around. As the banquet concluded, Grace and Julian stood at the entrance seeing guests off. Suddenly, Grace saw a familiar figure, Ethan Shaw. He looked much more haggard, standing hesitantly in the distance, his gaze complex as he watched everything unfold. Julian noticed Grace's gaze, followed it, and gently squeezed her hand. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Grace smiled slightly and shook her head. "I'm not afraid. I was just thinking, if it weren't for the hurt back then, I might never have met you." Julian tightened his grip on her hand. "Then I should thank him." They looked at each other and smiled, walking hand in hand back into the wedding hall. The setting sun cast their shadows long behind them, shadows that could never be separated again. In the winding river of fate, they had finally found each other, ready to walk hand in hand towards a happy future.